638. Chen Pinggan and the reclusive officials Sword Immortals discussed the matter of suppressing victory. The Sword Immortals understood the logic behind it. However, Chen Pinggan's example left Sword Immortal Cho Miao feeling that it was a little difficult to understand. Under the heavens, the third leader of the Beko Keikyung building, Lu Chen, once went to the young hidden official's hometown. In the Pearl Grotto Heaven, he hid his identity and set up a fortune-telling stall. He stayed there for more than 10 years. He was suppressed by the great Tao of the world and remained in the Ascendant Realm. Wang Xinshui blamed the hidden official. Why didn't he tell such a shocking story earlier? He had said earlier that his respect for the hidden official had reached the Ascendant Realm and not the current nascent Soul Realm bottleneck. Guo Zhujiu had the highest state among the 6 people who were closest to the young hidden official. She was qualified to judge everyone based on their comprehension and achievements. Even Guo Zhujiu felt that some of Jiyu Zhenlong's fair words were new and surprising. Therefore, her state was not low. She was in the state of immortals and was second only to Jiyu Zhenlong. Because of Xian Shen's chess playing, he had a trump card. It was like a disciple of a big sect who had obtained a peerless secret manual that allowed him to reach the upper 5 realms and reach the pure Jade realm. Cao Gun came to this mountain to learn it too late and was not diligent enough, so he was only in the Aurus Core realm. Wang Xinshui was at the nascent Soul realm bottleneck. As for Sword Immortal Miu, she was not even an Earth Immortal because of her poor talent and lack of sincerity. Today, Chen Pinggan went out for a walk again. After Guo Zhujiu finished her work, she moved the little snowman on the table and patted its head. Then, she carried the small bamboo box and ran out. She called it Little Guo Zhujiu's gaze and supervision. Whoever the little snowman looked at was a sign of concern and encouragement. Whoever the little snowman pointed at with the bamboo stick was a sign of supervision. Whoever dared to not work diligently would lose their heads if the bamboo stick was used as a flying sword. Her master was still walking slowly today. Guo Zhujiu caught up with him after a few steps. Guo Zhujiu asked, "Master, why are you walking so slowly recently? Are you cultivating?" Chen Pinggan smiled. "Yes, I'm cultivating my mind." Guo Zhujiu walked in a circle at the side, facing her master. "I don't need to learn such a profound knowledge, do I?" "You can't even learn it, can you?" Chen Pinggan said, "Anyone can learn it, but they don't have to." The little girl was both happy and worried. In a secluded courtyard, Chen Pinggan took out a horizontal river talisman and a soil earth talisman. Shifu will draw you a map of the vast world. Every time he arrived at a continent, he would tell the little girl about the local conditions and customs. Some of it was what he saw with his own eyes, some of it was recorded in books, and some of it was just hearsay. The southeastern Tongyi continent with a Daoist temple, the eastern treasure bottle continent in his master's hometown, the North Lu continent with the most sword cultivators traveling through the Great Wall of Sword Qi, the White Jade continent where the world's snow was produced, the northwest Liu Xia continent where Buddhism flourished, the west Jinzhou continent with the ruins of an ancient battlefield, the southwest Fu Yarou continent which was now in turmoil, and the south Po Suo continent, where the Melo Chen family was located. Lin Junbai's hometown, the central divine continent. Squatting in the corridor, Guo Zhujiu looked at the map and sighed. The sky is round and the earth is flat. If the sky is not round and the earth is round, then Shifu's hometown, the treasure bottle continent, would be close if he wanted to travel to the Jinzhou continent. Why would he need to take such a long detour? Chen Pinggan smiled and said, because all the heavens, as well as all the paradises, are new territories after they were shattered. If you can find them all, and add them to the 5th heavens that the scholarly saints have just discovered, you can piece them together. Perhaps the sky will be round and the earth will be round, just like the scene of the moon in the middle of the moon. During the study trip to the Cliff Academy in the Great Sui Kingdom, Little Treasure had once asked this question. However, the one who had answered this question at that time was the almost omniscient Kui Dongshan. Then, Kui Dongshan took out a bowl of water, a jade-green tree branch that he had just broken off, and a stone that he had casually picked up. Kui Dongshan pretended to be mysterious and asked everyone what they thought about the heavens and earth. Unfortunately, the rice was cooked and the stewed fish was fragrant, so no one paid attention to him. Kui Dongshan threw the stone away and stuck the tree branch diagonally into the back of his collar. He poured the water in the bowl and asked Chen Pinggan for a bowl of rice. Chen Pinggan said that he was going to find Pang Yuanji, who was hiding somewhere in a daze. Guo Zhujiu jumped up, shouted the order, and ran away. Guo Zhujiu returned to the main hall. The atmosphere was still a little heavy and solemn. When Master was here, it was fine. But when Master was not here, it was even more suffocating. Guo Zhujiu took the bamboo box and put it beside her feet. After that incident, Lin Junbai asked Hidden Official if he could tell all the sword cultivators in the Great Wall of Sword Qi about the incident of the Ascendant Realm Great Demon being killed outside the inverted mountain at the border. Otherwise, in the long run, the rise and fall of the people's hearts would be like a flood bursting through a dam. It could easily affect the entire war situation. However, Chen Pinggan only said that it was not necessary and that they could wait. The heated discussion was only directed at him, Hidden Official, and not all the sword cultivators in the Hidden Official's line. Therefore, it did not matter much for the time being. Pang Yuanji sat on the railing of a corridor and was speechless. He had a lot on his mind and was speechless. Hearing the footsteps, Pang Yuanji turned his head and looked over. He nodded as a greeting. In the end, Pang Yuanji waited for a long time before that guy sat beside him. It seemed that every time Chen Pinggan left the main hall recently, he was just taking a stroll. His pace was still the same. It could only be described as slow. Chen Pinggan sat beside him and handed him a pot of wine. This is the immortal wine from Spring Banner House. It's very expensive. The taste is no worse than the Bamboo Sea Grotto Heaven wine. Pang Yuanji shook his head. Forget it. I haven't drunk for a long time. Chen Pinggan looked at this guy with stubble on his face and said, "Don't worry about saying something that makes you feel better. I know you're angry at me, but you feel that it's unreasonable, so you can only bear with it. Actually, there's no need to do this. Do you think you're in a wine jar? You think you can make good wine by storing sad things?" Pang Yuanji said, "You should have explored the corners of the Summer Palace and the Winter Palace, right?" Chen Pinggan nodded and said, "Of course. It's a pity that there aren't any hidden mechanisms. I couldn't find any unexpected treasures." Pang Yuanji said softly, "But you definitely don't feel what I feel. It's not that I only feel this way now. I realized it not long after I entered the line of the old Hidden Officials. What do you feel? Tell me." Chen Pinggan opened the pot of wine and took a sip. He said, "I only care about drinking and listening to your complaints. There's no need to reason. Sometimes, venting your emotions is a kind of reason." Pang Yuanji was in a daze. He muttered, "2 residences. Is there anything extra? Are there any decorations or items?" "There's nothing. When my master left the Great Wall of Sword Qi, she left behind the Hidden Official Jade token and all the secret records. Then, I stayed here alone. There's only one feeling. It feels like my master has never been to this summer palace in her life. All this time, I've been thinking, what does my master think and do when she's alone? Does she have times when she's sad and disappointed but can't tell anyone? Everyone thinks that my master should always be strong and invincible. She kills demons again and again. I've never felt that way." At this point, Pang Yuanji looked at the top of the city wall. Speaking of his master, Xiao Chuo, he could not help but think of the eldest sword immortal. If the 2 summer palaces of the Hidden Officials were so lonely, then the eldest sword immortal who only had a thatched cottage must be even more so. It seemed like very few people at the Great Wall of Sword Qi had thought deeply about what the eldest sword immortal was thinking and feeling. Chen Pinggan looked around and nodded. "Now that you mention it, I realize that the residences are indeed empty. This means that your master, Xiao Chuo, is very powerful. Only an extremely strong and self-centered person would not care about worldly possessions at all. You can't do it." "Of course, I can't do it either." In fact, Chen Pinggan's feelings towards an unfamiliar environment were much earlier and deeper than a stranger. However, this was not the way to talk. Pang Yuanji's eyes reddened. He raised his head and took a deep breath. He smiled sadly and said, "I thought you would curse at my master. At the very least, you would curse me to death." After all, he was Pang Yuanji's master. On the battlefield, he had almost killed this young hidden official's senior brother with a single punch. Moreover, it was a sneak attack in the most despicable way. A person's self-mockery at the most painful moment was a subconscious form of self-protection. Chen Pinggan shook his head and drank his wine. If I want to talk about those high and mighty principles, a few baskets of baskets wouldn't be enough for me. I can scold you and your master however I want. It's meaningless. You have to tolerate other people's selfishness. Otherwise, in the end, you're the one who's mentally tired. Why bother? Chen Pinggan continued, let's not talk about Xiao Chuo's betrayal. You and I both know how much she has done for the Great Wall of Sword Qi. As for why she betrayed, I might understand it better than you. After all, I was a bystander. However, many sword immortals and sword cultivators from the Great Wall of Sword Qi chose to forget about it. Some did it on purpose, some did it unintentionally. Very few understood it but did not accept it. Therefore, I guess that's why you feel the most aggrieved. Pang Yuanji remained silent. Chen Pinggan took a big gulp of wine and smiled. Indeed, the selfish Pang Yuanji is still doing the sword cultivation of the hidden official's lineage. He's no worse than anyone else. In terms of matters, you don't owe the Great Wall of Sword Qi anything. In terms of your heart, you don't owe anything to your master. What more do you want Pang Yuanji to do well? Therefore, Chen Pinggan did not think that Pang Yuanji's path of cultivation would end just because his sword heart was unstable. It was as if he was going around in circles. Pang Yuanji smiled bitterly. Even hearing you say that doesn't make me feel any better. Chen Pinggan said, I'll ask you one last question. You don't have to answer. Pang Yuanji did not want to hear this question. He would definitely feel uncomfortable. Chen Pinggan asked, if you could kill Xiao Chuo immediately after she threw that punch, what would Pang Yuanji do? Pang Yuanji subconsciously followed the master and disciple's example. He lowered his shoulders and looked spirited. Pang Yuanji did not answer this question. Chen Pinggan smiled. Since you're going to feel uncomfortable anyway, I might as well make you feel even worse. Pang Yuanji wanted to say that he had asked and that the hidden official could continue with his work. However, that person said, why don't I ask you another question? Pang Yuanji asked, if I don't give you an answer, will you keep asking? Chen Pinggan drank the wine and just asked himself, I heard that Lin Junbai's senior brother is actually an Ascendant Realm big demon at the border. Do you feel a little better in your heart? Will you feel even worse because you're friends with Lin Junbai and realized that you thought that way? Pang Yuanji's face was bitter. Chen Pinggan patted Pang Yuanji's shoulder. Just bear with it. You won't be able to escape. You won't see anyone if you close the door, but how can you not see your heart? Who did not have a reason to talk about? Lying to oneself was the easiest thing in the world. Chen Pinggan did not push his luck. He took a big gulp of wine and prepared to leave Pang Yuanji alone. Pang Yuanji turned around and asked, Chen Pinggan, why do I feel like you're taking pleasure in my misfortune? Chen Pinggan said in surprise, you can tell that too? I don't have any other skills, but I'm very good at hiding secrets. Brother Pang, you have a good eye. Pang Yuanji was confused. Really? Chen Pinggan said unhappily, what's there to be honest about? We're brothers in the same boat when it comes to this. Why do you think I asked you to drink with me? I'll feel better if you feel uncomfortable. Pang Yuanji sighed and said weakly, I'm begging you to scram. Chen Pinggan jumped down from the railing and smiled. You can only talk to the reclusive official like this once. Don't do it again. You can't bully an honest person who's easy to talk to. Pang Yuanji suddenly said, Chen Pinggan, I won't go down the city wall to fight. In the corridor, Chen Pinggan turned around and smiled. As long as you're not afraid of the cursing outside, you don't have to worry about anything on my side. The new reclusive official's line doesn't have any rules that require sword cultivators to go out of the city to kill demons. Pang Yuanji's expression was bitter. He said sadly, we're brothers in the same boat. Chen Pinggan smiled. When you can learn from Lin Junbai and find joy in the midst of pain, you'll have succeeded in your cultivation. Pang Yuanji stood there in a daze. The Q-sword battle between the savage world and the Great Wall of Sword Chi continued. However, during this period, the savage world did something other than the Q-sword battle. The pinnacle demon Yang Ji and the woman in dragon robes returned to the battlefield and hovered in the sky. She carried a half-dead person in her hand. It was a sword immortal who had stopped an army from going north. Yang Ji and Huang Luan, who was of similar seniority, each had their own gains. However, the two sword immortals that Huang Luan had killed had their corpses destroyed and their souls dispersed. Yang Ji, on the other hand, captured a sword immortal alive. On the battlefield, Yang Ji's 5 fingers grabbed the head of the dying sword immortal. He stood not far away from the 2 torrents of sword chi. He first revealed the origins of the sword immortal and what he had done in the savage world. Then, under everyone's gaze, Yang Ji stripped the sword immortal's flesh and blood. This process was extremely slow. He first removed the flesh and blood, then crushed the tendons and bones. Following that, he carved out a golden core and ground it inch by inch. Then, he killed the nascent soul bit by bit. Finally, he extracted and scattered the sword immortal's soul. After Yang Ji appeared, the hidden official's flying sword sent messages to various parts of the Great Wall of Sword Chi. It was the flying sword with the words Hidden Official carved on it. No sword immortals or sword cultivators were allowed to touch Yang Ji's sword. Later, several great sword immortals privately sent messages to the Summer Palace on their flying swords, asking if the sword formation could still be maintained. However, they were allowed to work together to interrupt Yang Ji's actions. The hidden official's flying sword replied that the great sword immortals were still not allowed to act on their own and that the pinnacle demons, including Huang Luan, were waiting for them. This more obvious ambush was very likely to be even more deadly than the great demons hidden in the 5 mountains. The position where Yang Ji stood was very particular. He was slightly behind. This slight position was very likely to be able to take the lives of 1 or 2 great sword immortals from the Great Wall of Sword Chi. Once the battle spread, the top forces of both sides would enter the fray. No matter how many casualties there were on both sides, the battle would progress extremely quickly. Naren Huawei, Yu Qing, and Yao Lianyun all resisted the urge to attack. However, the accumulated frustration in their hearts was destined to be a lot. Even Yu Qing cursed out loud. Yao Lianyun's expression was even gloomier. Before this, the patriarch of the Yarrow family had been feeling refreshed every day. Every time he attacked with his sword, he was extremely carefree. It could even be said that he was full of energy. The biggest problem was that the sword immortals obeyed the orders of the hidden official. However, there was a group of young sword cultivators who were inconsolable. They attacked first before the sword immortals. In an instant, dozens of flying swords appeared and Q-sword great demons stopped. If not for the few great sword immortals immediately stopping them, there might have been more than 100 intrinsic flying swords that shot towards the great demon. If that were to happen, there would only be more flying swords following. When that happened, the entire sword array might very well have a divergence. As for Yang Ji's response, it was full of surprises. After the great sword immortals stopped Q-sword from attacking, not only did they not destroy any of the flying swords, but they also controlled the flying swords of the sword cultivators on the city wall that had lost control and approached the tragic sword immortal. It was as if they were purposely letting the dying sword immortal meet the young sword cultivators. In the end, she threw the 39 flying swords back to the city wall one by one, allowing them to safely return to the sword formation. Yang Ji finally shattered the remaining soul of the sword immortal in her hand. She laughed and said, "What a great wall of sword chi! What a sword immortal with heaven-defying killing power." Everyone was unwilling to help, but when it was the turn of a group of insignificant sword cultivators, they were willing to risk their lives to save him. I understand that the former cherished their lives, but I respect the latter's stupidity. After that, the hearts of the people on the Great Wall of Sword Chi seemed to be more complicated than when the previous hidden official, Xiao Chuo, betrayed the Great Wall of Sword Chi and heavily injured his left and right. The command of the hidden official on the top of the city wall, which was originally becoming smoother and smoother, gradually became sluggish here and there. On the Great Wall of Sword Chi, there was an indignant statement that came from the bottom of his heart. It's not like you, the hidden official, need to risk your life. Why didn't you save him? We sword cultivators are willing to die, so why didn't you? Then, there were more statements. Today, that sword immortal risked his life to kill the enemy in the hinterland of the wasteland. If he didn't save him, which sword cultivator would the hidden official save in the future when the wasteland besieges the city, as long as there's a possibility that it's a trap? Even that great demon respected someone who was willing to risk his life. Who would have thought that our own people would be so cold and ruthless, calculating and scheming everywhere? Is such a hidden official really beneficial to the Great Wall of Sword Chi? It's really comparable to the actions of the previous hidden official. At the very least, before the latter betrayed us, he dared to personally charge into battle and kill countless demons. With these statements floating on the surface, it meant that there were definitely more thoughts and ideas hidden in the depths of people's hearts. Chen Pinggan walked back to the main hall. Just then, Song Gaoyuan, Cao Gun, and Xian Kan were returning from the city wall. Next, it would be the turn of the three native sword cultivators, Luo Zhani, Xu Ning, and Chang Taiqing, to fight on the city wall. Song Gaoyuan and Cao Gun looked gloomy. Xian Kan was relatively the youngest, but he was the most open-minded sword cultivator. He even had a smile on his face as he said, "Hidden official, I advise Luo Zhani and the other two not to go to the city wall for the time being. Firstly, they will be isolated. Most of the time, other sword cultivators will fight for the battlefield. Our swords will be almost useless. Secondly, although they didn't say anything bad about us, they didn't have anything good to say when they mentioned you. The first two groups of sword cultivators who went to the city wall to kill demons mostly returned with injuries. This time, Xian Kan and the other two were safe and sound. Luo Zhani and the other two stood at the door, looking at the young hidden official questioningly. It was still up to the hidden official to decide whether to go or not. Chen Pinggan turned his head and said, "We still have to go." Luo Zhani nodded and left with the other two sword cultivators. Chen Pinggan smiled and said, "You've worked hard." Cao Gun looked dispirited. "We didn't work hard at all." Chen Pinggan comforted him, "That's true work." Cao Gun's smile was forced. He wanted to say something but stopped. They returned to the main hall and sat down. Lin Junbai said helplessly, "It's not like we can tell everyone. The vast heaven's 8 continents ferries are no longer the same as our business deal. We have a chance to prolong the war, and make the wildlands spend even more resources than before. Even the peak greater demons will be hurt. We've calculated for so long and finally saw a little hope of victory for the first time. How can we fail because of Yang Ji's dirty tricks?" Xian Kan said unhappily, "There's often a saying that the one who kills kills, the one who kills on behalf of the husband kills. It's called the Great Craftsman." Cao Gun nodded in agreement. "The one who kills on behalf of the Great Craftsman hopes not to hurt his hand." Lin Junbai smiled bitterly. "You're just using the words of the saints. Besides, it's not like they're comforting words." Chen Pinggan smiled. "Let's not talk about the original meaning of the saints. Let's just say that it has a special meaning when used here and now." Sword Immortal Cho Miao, who rarely spoke, had some insights. The truth in the eyes is the truth, but it's ultimately not the truth. This is the most difficult to reason with. Many endless quarrels were not because one side was extremely unreasonable and the other side was extremely reasonable. Instead, it was because each side had their own reasons and how much was right and wrong. Lin Junbai asked, "Can this situation be resolved?" Chen Pinggan nodded. "Of course." "How so?" "Let's first assume that there's no solution." Everyone was speechless. Only Lin Junbai seemed to have understood. After Pang Yuanji returned to his seat, Chen Pinggan spoke telepathically to the three of them. Sword Immortal Cho Miao, Lin Junbai, and Pang Yuanji. Sword Immortal Cho Miao rejected him directly. Pang Yuanji was depressed and could not be bothered to say another word. Lin Junbai asked, "Master Hidden Official, you were the one who caught that Ascendant Realm demon. Why are you sharing this great merit with the three of us?" Chen Pinggan smiled. "To resolve the situation. If I'm the only one who did it, who would believe me? Even if they believe me, what can they do? Oh right, When the young sword cultivators of the Great Wall of Sword Qi are at their wits' end, for example, when they gather outside the Summer Palace to cause a ruckus, Sword Immortal Cho Miao, who has the highest cultivation level, will be in charge of ascending the city and bringing back the demon's head to return the favor to the wilderness. Pang Yuanji said, "If I had known, I would have agreed to drink and died outside." Guo Zhujiu did not know what her master was mumbling to someone. They were probably discussing something. Guo Zhujiu finally lowered her head and looked at the two items on the table that were under her care. They were gifts from the mountains and rivers of the Fuyao continent. The ancient inkstone was an inkstone with kuei long patterns and worm-eaten patterns. It was engraved with the Tibetan seal. Clouds drooped and water stood, the words were deeply intertwined. As for the round fan with flowing treasure light, the words on it were quite elegant: golden ripples, jade round ball. Old and stubborn, sleepwalking in the moon palace, chopping away the Osman thus whirlpool. Yes, more clear light. This night was the most reunited, with millions of lights. Her master had secretly told her that as long as she earned some battle merits, she and her master could keep these two treasures for themselves. Dong Bude suddenly raised her head and said, "Lu Duan, I have long taken a fancy to that fan." Guo Zhujiu asked, "If Chen Sancho took it before, Sister Dong, would you want it?" Dong Bude laughed coldly and said, "If Chen Sancho wants to see this fan, you have to break through the walls of the Summer Palace to open a path." Guo Zhujiu slapped her forehead and said proudly, "My iron head technique is amazing. Even my master can't compare to it." Chen Pinggan laughed and said, "I don't want to compete with this. Remember, this is not an ultimate technique of the sect. You came up with it yourself." Guo Zhujiu nodded and said, "Eldest senior sister's mad demon sword technique and this ultimate technique of mine can be carried forward in the future." Chen Pinggan waved his hand and continued to stare at the painting on the ground. Guo Zhujiu touched the little snowman's head. It was getting smaller and smaller. Chen Pinggan suddenly asked, "Will Lu Ji return to the inverted hanging mountain soon?" Lin Junbai nodded and said, "If there is no accident, she should return with Xiao Yunyang today." Chen Pinggan stood up and said, "Cho Miao, accompany me to the inverted hanging mountain. Spring Banner House." Miu was meticulous and focused on the matter of checking the accounts. In fact, this was not what Miu was good at. To put it bluntly, if Yang Ming and Nailand Saihuan really wanted to use the account books for personal gain, there was only one possibility that Miu could find flaws in them. That was, the young hidden official had seen it and then asked Miu, who had memorized it by rote, to pass the message. Therefore, Nailand Saihuan and Yang Ming could cooperate and restrain each other. Miu was just a spy that the young recluse had placed in the Spring Banner House. Nailand Saihuan saw Miu as the second sword immortal Jiao Kuei who deliberately drank the wine of the Bamboo Sea Cave. Anyone who had a relationship with the young recluse did not have good intentions towards her. However, Miu often encountered difficult problems and asked Yang Ming for the key tricks. Yang Ming had a very bad impression of Miu. It could only be said that he did not have a good impression of Miu. In the Great Wall of Sword Qi, anyone who had some ambition, regardless of whether they were sword immortals or not, had a bad impression of sword immortal Mi who liked to drink in the clouds. After Miu asked 3 times, he looked like he would ask 30 more times in the future. This made Nailand Saihuan feel that Miu was a little strange. Nailand Saihuan did not bother to hide anything from Miu and asked directly, "Miu, is your brain cramping?" However, Miu said, "It's not like it's just a day or two." Nailand Saihuan did not bother to be polite and said, "Miu, you are really not suitable for settling accounts. Don't delay Master Yang's business. Not to mention that Xiao Yunyang is not in the inverted hanging mountain now. Even if he was in the Spring Banner House, Xiao Yunyang is still a sword immortal from another place. If no one from our side shows up early, it will be just a sword immortal in the Spring Banner House. It's not appropriate. You said something disgusting before, but it does make some sense." Miu asked curiously, "Which one?" Yang Ming said, "Thunder begins with lightning, but it starts with awe-inspiring sound." Miu laughed, "So that's how it is." This saying came from a fan in the Yang family shop. The reason why Miu said it was because of the sentence on the other side of the folding fan, "Before the beauty arrives, the fragrance wafts, before the person rises, the body and mind is already moved, which made Miu fall in love at first sight. The words on one side of the folding fan were serious and the wording on the other side was graceful. It made Miu feel that it was tailor-made for him. It was a pity that some young lady had beat him to it. Fortunately, the Yang family shop also sold engraved booklets with fan inscriptions, and the price was not low. In the room, there was an outsider who looked down at his nose. He was the direct disciple of Xiao Yunyang of the Spring Banner House, Wei Wenlong, a genius in calculation. Compared to the three outsiders in the room, Wei Wenlong was very reserved. Only when he sat alone in the accounting room and faced the boring account books in the eyes of outsiders, would he be like a fish in the water. In the end, Wei Wenlong was not good at dealing with people. He was destined to only have two friends in this life: numbers and divine money. Money, food, and financial management had been seen as a lowly profession since ancient times. The officials of the Ministry of Revenue would even be ridiculed as corrupt officials. In fact, it was the same on the mountain and at the foot of the mountain. For example, the stewards of the 8 states ferry, which one of them was not a pitiful person who could not break through their own bottlenecks? Moreover, Wei Wenlong was only a golden core cultivator. In the room, there were 2 nascent soul sword cultivator masters who had been famous for a long time, and sword deity Mi, who seemed to be in the lower 5 realms from their conversation. He did not dare to breathe too loudly. Qi cultivators who were born and raised in the inverted mountain were not unfamiliar with the Great Wall of Sword Aura, but they were also not familiar with it. On the contrary, he was not as good as those foreigners who deliberately traveled to the inverted mountain. The latter usually went for the Great Wall of Sword Aura. People like Wei Wenlong from the inverted mountain had never been to the Great Wall of Sword Aura in their lives. What Wei Wenlong was most afraid of was the famous sword deity Miu. Flirtatious people were the most fickle. What's more, he was a sword deity. Miu felt that Nayland Saihuan's auntie was right, so he humbly accepted her advice and got up to leave the room. Before Miu left, his expression was kind and his words were sincere. He said to Wei Wenlong, "Wenlong, you are a talent that even our hidden official thinks highly of. Don't belittle yourself. Do your job well and you will have a bright future. In the future, we will be friends." Wei Wenlong hurriedly stood up, but he was very reserved and timid. He could not let out a fart. Miu found this kid more and more pleasing to the eye. He told Wei Wenlong to sit down and do his work. There was no need to be so polite. Miu walked to the empty lobby. Miu glanced at the seats that belonged to the female cultivators and the ship owners a few times. Miu finally sat on his chair and took out a jade token that he was going to give to someone. This was a little strange. The jade token in Miu's hand was engraved with the number 99. Before Master Hidden Officer left, he specially instructed him to give it to Osmanthus Island, the ferry boat of the Fan family in Old Dragon City. He did not even give face to Sword Immortal Xiao, let alone Jiang Gaotai, the owner of the southern basket boat of the White Jade Continent. But in fact, the small steward of the Ding family's ferry boat was trembling with fear. He secretly looked for Master Hidden Officer and gave him a fair price that even Miu was surprised. However, the Ding family sincerely hoped that Master Hidden Officer would be troubled with the transaction in the future, so that the Ding family's ferry boat would not become the target of public criticism and be hated by others. The young Master Hidden Officer smiled and agreed, saying that Spring Banner House would definitely return the favor. Later, when Miu asked about this matter, Master Hidden Officer only said that every family had their own difficulties and that the Ding family of Old Dragon City had no other choice. Since the Ding family did not have a female ferry owner, Mi Genxian did not bother to think about it. However, Miu knew a lot about the Fan family's ferry boat. There was no other way. There was a Madame Gui on Osmanthus Island. She was very outstanding, not because of her appearance. Miu was not a layman. He knew that there were thousands of types of beauty in women. Just by looking at their faces, breasts, and long legs, one would not know that there were many good things about women. They were simply not up to standard and could not be called someone similar to Miu. Old Dragon City's Fan family was very unremarkable among the families that dealt in the ferry business. In fact, other than the Fu family, which had a little bit of face, the other families' ferry boats were not worth mentioning when they docked at inverted Hanging Mountain. For example, the Ding family's ferry owner in Spring Banner House's main hall could not even compare to the Nishong ferry owner, Liu Shen. As long as it was a beautiful woman, Miu would be tempted and would not let her down. Miu quickly remembered that there was a young lady called Jin Su on Osmanthus Island. She was also very beautiful. Of course, Miu had never seen her before. Miu would not do anything just to see Jin Su. He would not do anything in the past, and he would not do anything now. There was actually a reason why Spring Banner House was able to gather so many ferries at once. Wu Qiu, Bai Shi, these old foxes, along with the Rain Dragon sect who had the Water Essence Palace on inverted Hanging Mountain and the Plum Blossom Garden, they all helped. However, Hidden Official did not mention this matter from start to finish, and did not even plan to take revenge. It was just a small matter. For example, this time around, only the 12 ship owners had received an invitation to the Spring Banner House to discuss the matter. Some of the ferry owners who docked at inverted Hanging Mountain chose to stay for a while. They were not in a rush to unload or leave, waiting for Spring Banner House's invitation. Apart from the closest South Swa continent, the other ferries shouldn't have returned to their own continents and should still be on their way back. In Aquarius continent, apart from the Fan family's Osmanthus Island, there was also the Hu family's Smoke Spirit ferry. They should have received a flying sword message from either the Fu family or the Ding family. These two cross-continent ferries arrived at inverted Hanging Mountain 2 days later. The 8 continents ferries of various sizes had more or less personal relationships with sword immortals like the Yang family, the Nayland family, and Sun Juyuan. The reason was simple. Over at the Great Wall of Sword Chi, sword immortals or disciples of the major clans would make all sorts of strange requests. Not only would they spend a lot of money to buy rare and precious antiques, they would also buy delicacies that were much more expensive. There were almost 100 types of delicacies. The Hu family's ferry, Smoke Spirit, would provide special incense in addition to supplies. They would let the immortals weave 16 types of incense sachets and sell them to the fixed buyers at the Great Wall of Sword Chi. Regarding this matter, the Hidden Officials line had many disputes. Lin Junbai and sword immortal Cho Miao rarely stood on the same side, and proposed to cut off all such supply channels. In the future, the Great Wall of Sword Chi would no longer accept any useless items. But in the end, the Hidden Officials line chose a compromise. They reduced such transactions, but did not cut them off completely. Osmanthus Island, which was still docked at the Release Pavilion ferry, received an invitation from the Spring Banner shop. After the Hu family's ferry manager arrived, he first informed them. Now, the manager of Osmanthus Island had fallen into the hands of Ma Ji of the Fan family. He was a Jindan sword immortal, and his flying sword was Cool Shade. The small courtyard of the Gui family on Osmanthus Island was under the name of a foreigner, and had not been open to the public for many years. Ma Ji had once taught a foreigner's swordsmanship there. In Lady Gui's elegant courtyard, her disciple Jin Su was in charge of cooking tea and entertaining guests. Ma Ji and the Hu family's ferry manager were discussing how to present gifts. They had heard that Lingji shop had lost more than 100 immortal treasures in a single night. What was left were either some fancy spiritual weapons that were too little in value, or some rare magical treasures that were too expensive and intimidating. The ferry manager, Hu Peng, was very worried about this matter. Although the Hu family's business was very good in the vast area north of Old Dragon City and south of Lakeview Academy, the amount of Guyu's money on the books was actually rather limited. If the Hu family had already heard of this matter before their ferry, Smoke Spirit, left Old Dragon City, they would have needed to make a trip to Spring Banner shop. It would not be too troublesome if they had prepared a generous gift before entering. Guyu's money was still something they could fork out. However, Hu Peng and Osmanthus Island had received a flying sword message midway. Hu Peng needed to fork out his own money first, which was a headache. If it was too little, the gift would not be of enough weight. If the goods were compared and Spring Banner shop disdained them, they would definitely be criticized by the Fan family's ancestral hall. However, if Guyu forked out too much money, Spring Banner shop would pass and the family would gossip about another matter. Those who really did things were like this. The more they did, the more mistakes they made. Those who enjoyed life at home, on the other hand, would gossip all year round. Margie was not much better. Now that the Fan family was in troubled times, the old swordsman was also implicated because of his close relationship with the future head of the family, Fan. Now, his every move was carefully watched by the old men in the Fan family's ancestral hall. The eldest daughter, Fan Junmao, had not appeared for a long time. The Fan family announced to the public that she had gone out on a trip alone. Margie had some guesses, but did not dare to mention this to anyone. Fan, who had turned from a teenager to a young man, gradually began to participate in the family's business affairs. Margie naturally belonged to Fan. Otherwise, Margie would not be the manager of the ferry. Even if Madame Gui suggested that Margie be the owner of the ferry, the Fan family's ancestral hall would not agree. Although Osmanthus Island had long been under Fan name, the Fan family now had a lot of criticism of this young and inexperienced second young master. Because he had borrowed a large sum of money from Guyu to Luopa Mountain in Dali Longquan, the debate in the ancestral hall was very intense. Many of the old men in the Fan family felt that Fan was still too young and impulsive. Even if he was the future head of the family, he should not be in charge of the ferry on Osmanthus Island. There should be a mature and prudent senior in the Fan family to help take care of it for a few years before letting Fan manage it. If not for the Sun family's money going down the drain, and the fact that Fan had used a large sum of money under his name, this matter would not have passed. Madame Gui just drank her tea. She was demure and did not speak. Both sides roughly discussed how to prepare the gifts and how to act after entering the Spring Banner House. Generally speaking, they followed the example of the Fu family and the Ding family, speaking less and observing more. Hu Peng put down his teacup, and a strange expression appeared on his face. After Margie finished talking, he did not drink the tea anymore. He minded his own business and drank a small pot of Osmanthus wine. Hu Peng asked softly, "The new hidden official is called Chen Pingan?" Margie's face was tense, but he still could not hold it in. He laughed and said, "Brother Hu Peng, what are you thinking?" Jin Su was confused. Madame Gui explained softly, "The new hidden official of the Great Wall of Sword Qi is a young sword immortal called Chen Pingan." Hu Peng added, "You speak of the world's great and elegant words very fluently." Jin Su could not help but secretly laugh. She was exactly the same as Margie, but not as loudly as the latter. There was no choice. She and senior Margie were too familiar with the other Chen Pingan. That Chen Pingan from the Great Li dynasty had lived in the small courtyard of the Gui lineage, which was not too far from here on Osmanthus Island. Jin Su did not think that this was a problem. This shipmaster whose way of thinking was too out of place. The two of them had the same name, and they were both called Chen Pingan. How could they be the same person? Was it possible? In Jin Su's memory, he was a guest who would spend money to invite the painting experts of Osmanthus Island to paint for him as a souvenir. He was a foreign youth who was dressed neatly but could not hide his shabby aura. He seemed to have carried a sword on his back. However, he was a pure martial artist who did not have a high realm. In the end, under her master's instructions, Jin Su accompanied the youth to tour the various scenic spots of the inverted hanging mountain. Restrained, old-fashioned, boring. He was just such a foreign teen. He vaguely remembered that he seemed to have dark skin, was not tall, and was thin and weak. His voice was not loud, and he liked to look around. However, when he talked to others, his eyes were clear, and his gaze would not wander. He would just look at the other party and listen attentively. Hu Peng said, "Since even that old Ding returned to Old Dragon City safely, then I was thinking too much." Margie smiled and nodded his head. They could not talk about this matter. It was enough that each of them knew what they were doing. It was a small world. A duckweed returning to the ocean. It was a small world. Meeting was fate, but fate was also split into good and bad. If it was that what if, then Osmanthus Island was a good thing that fell from the heavens. As for the Fu family and the other families of Old Dragon City, it was hard to say. Dust Medicine Shop, Martial Grandmaster Zheng Dafeng, and the Fu family agreed to go to the dragon platform. City Lord Fu Liu, who used a half-immortal weapon, had a fight with Zheng Dafeng after that. Apart from the Fan family and the Sun family, the other families of Old Dragon City were all involved. They helped the Fu family and were in charge of stopping the people from the dust medicine shop. Among them, the Ding family was also involved in the originally arrogant Tongyi sect. It was said that the #1 celestial sect in the Tongya continent was not having a good time. When it rains, it pours. When it rains, it pours. Things that add fuel to the fire happen one after another. In short, the situation was very bleak. The Ding family was now implicated and suffered for nothing. Many of their business shares were mysteriously divided up in secret. However, the other families did not go overboard, so the Ding family could bear with it. Moreover, the Ding family was still following the Fu family and earning a lot of money. However, the Ding family would be at the bottom of Old Dragon City in the future. Therefore, the Ding family was bound to be very enthusiastic about the cross-continent ferry. They hoped to break the deadlock and establish a relationship with the Spring Banner House. Ma Ji and Hu Peng were both experienced people. Therefore, they could completely imagine that the Ding family would definitely offer an extremely low price. They would give up the ferry as a source of income. Under the premise that they would not make a loss, they would also want to form a relationship with the Great Wall of Sword Qi that was even more important than those in the same trade. After that, Ma Ji and Hu Peng left Osmanthus Island together. They first had to sit down with a few familiar ferry stewards. Then, according to the agreed time, they each went to Spring Banner House to bring gifts and pay a visit. In the small courtyard on Osmanthus Island, only the master and disciple were left. Without outsiders around, Jin Su complained to her master about the short-sightedness of the Fan family elders. Madame Gui smiled and said, "For the Fan family to be where it is today, those seemingly stubborn old people, not to mention those who started to enjoy life when they were young, the rest have all contributed greatly and have contributed greatly to the Fan family. The reason why you think they are short-sighted is because they are biased towards Sun Jiashu, who gave money to Luopa Mountain together with the Fan family." Jin Su blushed. Madame Gui said seriously, "When you look at people, you can have personal likes and dislikes. But when you look at worldly affairs, you can't have too many personal feelings. This is what a cultivator should have. Even if you are not a cultivator, you should still be like this. Otherwise, as a member of the Fan family and married to Sun Jiashu, if you don't say anything and just focus on cultivation and don't take care of the house, it will be fine. Otherwise, if you are not careful, you can make the Fan family and the Sun family hate each other." Her master was rarely so serious. Jin Su did not dare to be rash and kept it in mind. After sitting quietly for a while, Madame Gui told Jin Su that she did not need to accompany her. If she wanted to visit the shops on the inverted mountain, her master would not stop her. Jin Su was not interested. Now that the clouds on the inverted mountain were strange and even Osmanthus Island was covered in it, she did not have the mood. She just left the courtyard to cultivate. Not long after Jin Su left, there was a knock on the door. Madame Gui stood up and smiled. "Mr. Chen, please come in." A young man tore off the mask of a dull man and smiled. "Madame Gui, sorry to disturb you." Madame Gui smiled warmly and joked, "Rare guest, honored guest." After Chen Pinggan sat down, he said apologetically, "Madame Gui, don't think too much. I just came here to ask for a bottle of Osmanthus wine." Madame Gui took out a bottle of Osmanthus wine and handed it to the young man. She smiled and asked, "Since you said so, are you starting to pay attention to the plum blossom garden?" Chen Pinggan did not say anything. Madame Gui asked again, "Are you not worried that I am in cahoots with Madame Huanyan?" Chen Pinggan shook his head, "Of course not." Madame Gui did not ask about the plum blossom garden anymore. Chen Pinggan said that he came here to drink, but he did not drink much of the Osmanthus wine. He smiled and asked, "Miss Jin Su, do you still like Sun Jiashu and not Fan? Madame Gui nodded. Then Chen Pinggan just sat for a while, and Madame Gui just talked about Fan recent situation. Both sides seemed to have nothing more to say except for Fan. After a long separation, they did not talk much. It was not like when they first met, when the young man with the sword on his back and Madame Gui hit it off. And Madame Gui could see that the young hidden official was worried. It was obvious that the current situation was not easy. Chen Pinggan drank a small bottle of Osmanthus wine and prepared to return to the inverted Shen Mountain Spring Banner House, but he would not show himself there. This time, other than the so-called relaxation, more importantly, he hoped that Osmanthus Island would help him pass a secret letter to Kui Dongshan and vassal King Song Jisin. Madame Gui accepted the 2 secret letters. After Chen Pinggan thanked her and was about to leave, an acquaintance ran over from the courtyard door. It was Jin Su, the Osmanthus young mistress of Gui My Courtyard. Chen Pinggan stood up and greeted with a smile, "Miss Jin Su." Jin Su was stunned for a moment and stopped. Obviously, she did not expect this guy to sneak to Osmanthus Island. She also smiled and said, "Chen Pinggan, why are you here?" Then Jin Su quickly changed her words, "Young Master Chen." Chen Pinggan said helplessly, "You can just call me by my name." Jin Su nodded and sat beside Madame Gui. She asked softly, "Aren't you practicing at the Great Wall of Sword Chi? Why do you have time to come here to drink? I heard that the 2 gates of the inverted Shen Mountain are very strict, like guarding against thieves." Jin Su hesitated for a moment and asked softly, "Is it because you accidentally have the same name as the hidden official and are a little depressed, so you came here to drink?" Chen Pinggan held back his laughter and nodded, "Yes." Madame Gui also smiled knowingly. Jin Su said regretfully, "I was still hoping that you were the legendary hidden official, the Great Sword Celestial of the Great Wall of Sword Chi." Chen Pinggan said, "If I was really the hidden official, I think Miss Jin Su would be so depressed that you want to drink." Jin Su smiled and turned to Madame Gui and said, "Master, young Master Chen is more particular than before." Madame Gui smiled and asked, "Why did you come back?" Jin Su said softly, "I still want to go to Elk Cliff for a walk." Madame Gui looked at Chen Pinggan. The young man signaled with his eyes. Madame Gui nodded and said, "Just nice, you and young Master Chen are going the same way, you can go to Capture Pavilion together." Jin Su immediately said, no need, I am more familiar with the inverted Shen Mountain than young Master Chen." She liked Sun Jiashu and did not like Fan and Chen Pinggan and Fan were good friends, and were business partners with Sun Jiashu. So she felt that she should not have anything to do with Chen Pinggan. Madame Gui did not continue to make things difficult for the 2 of them, and allowed Jin Su to leave alone. Madame Gui smiled even more. Chen Pinggan waited for a while before bidding farewell to Madame Gui. Madame Gui sent them to the door, and suddenly said, "You have to be careful of the upright Sun Mountain." Chen Pinggan glanced at the direction of the Aquarius continent and nodded, "I will." At the same time, he muttered in his heart, "Tilda, in the future, upright Sun Mountain will have to kneel on the ground and beg me not to be so careful." Tilda. Madame Gui asked, "So it's finally the sword cultivator?" Chen Pinggan spoke in his mind, 2 natal flying swords. After revealing the identity of the sword cultivator, I will announce to the world that one is called Chai Chai, and the other is called Account Book." Madame Gui was silent for a while, and said against her will, "Good names." As for what the natal mystical ability of Chen Pinggan's 2 flying swords were, Madame Gui was no longer curious. Chen Pinggan scratched his head, and said, "As for the real name of the flying sword, a caged sparrow, I originally wanted to name it Mid-Autumn, but it seemed to clash with Flying Sword 15. As for the other one, I am still conflicted about whether it should be Moon in the Sky or Moon in the Well. It was not good to be too proficient in naming things." Madame Gui laughed. "Finally, there is a name for the flying sword." Chen Pinggan quietly left Osmanthus Island, and at Capture Pavilion, he first met with Sword Immortal Cho Miao. The 2 of them went to the Plum Blossom Garden. They wanted to meet Madame Wu Yang, who was in her hometown but was thinking of a foreign land. Other than Sword Immortal Cho Miao, of course there was also Lu Ji, who had gone to Fu Yarrow continent. To reason with a lady, she had to be a lady. 639. There is one more chapter at night. The Plum Blossom Garden was one of the 4 private residences in the inverted hanging mountain with the most winding corridors. Of course, the most famous ones were the plum trees. However, the plum trees planted in the Plum Blossom Garden grew naturally. They did not have the appearance of sickly plum blossoms. Even so, The plum blossom garden was still famous because the plum blossom garden bought many immortal plum trees from the ferry boat of the 8 continents and transplanted them into the garden. The best place to enjoy the scenery in the plum blossom garden was the pavilion with the plaque not fighting for spring. Madame Xianyang knelt on a bamboo mat made of green immortal mountain. Her hands were folded on her knees. She looked charming and had a smile on her face. She looked at the 3 sword cultivators who were slowly walking up the steps of the pavilion and smiled. Since the matter has been exposed, I am willing to accept the punishment. I only ask that great sword immortal Lu Ji be more nimble with your sword. Chen Pinggan sat on the ground and faced Madame Xianyang. He asked, "Are you not going to salvage the situation? It is not easy to cultivate a plant spirit of the upper 5 realms. In the entire history of the Aquarius continent, there had never been a plant spirit of the upper 5 realms." Madame Xianyang shook her head. "You can even find the border and kill it. I am not destined to live. I will not pretend." Chen Pinggan asked, "Is the real body of the Ascendant Realm demon buried in the plum blossom garden? Otherwise, how do you know the border is dead?" Madame Xianyang smiled and did not say anything. She extended a palm to the tall and thin woman. Someone once said that among the women of the Great Wall of Sword Qi, Sword Immortal Lu Ji is the most beautiful. You are the most beautiful. You and the sword are the most compatible. Today, I have seen you. Lu Ji frowned. Sword Immortal Cho Miao sighed. The reason for that was because he knew who had said those words. Chen Pinggan said, "Then I will only ask you one thing. You grew up in the vast world. Why do you yearn for the desolate world?" Madame Xianyang smiled. "The rules set by the Sage of Rites are good. Unfortunately, the later cultivators did not do it well. After ascending the mountain and cultivating the way, there were thousands of immortals. How many of them would treat us plant spirits who were lucky enough to take human form as human beings? Putting aside the hardships I suffered, after I was fortunate enough to escape from the sea of suffering, I looked up and saw that there were few exceptions in the world for thousands of years. That's why I've been resentful for a long time." She turned her head to look in the direction of a gate near the plum blossom garden. After retracting her gaze, she smiled and said, "It's not that I really like the uncivilized world. With a bunch of uncivilized beasts in charge, how much better can this remote world be compared to the vast world? I just want to see the vast world with my own eyes. Everyone on the mountain and at the foot of the mountain will die. Among them, the cultivators will die out first. Only the grass and trees will continue to grow, withering and blooming with each passing year." Was this reason enough? "Lord Hidden Official," Chen Pinggan said, "if you say it's enough, it's enough." Sword Immortal Cho Miao felt that this trip to the plum blossom garden was unexpectedly smooth. Lu Ji suddenly said, "It would be a waste not to use the military merits I saved up. In exchange for her life, I will keep her by my side in the future. Hidden Official, what do you think?" The worried seedling was a little surprised. Madame Wu Yang was even more shocked. Just now, she really did have the will to die. Previously, she had calculated everything. She would either die or live a life worse than death. If that was the case, her luck was not the worst. At least there was a woman among the sword immortals. Fortunately, it was not just those dirty men. She might as well be straightforward. Madame Wu Yang did not expect Lu Ji to say such things. Lu Ji said to Madame Wu Yang, "From now on, you will follow me in cultivation. You don't have to be a servant." Then, Lu Ji looked at Chen Pinggan, wanting to know the answer. Chen Pinggan thought about it and nodded. "Sure." Madame Wu Yang collapsed to the ground, tears welling up in her eyes. In the entire plum blossom garden, countless plum blossoms bloomed. This was Madame Wu Yang's life connected with the entire small world. Lu Ji frowned and said, "Wu Yang, I only have one request for you. In the future, if there is a man in front of you, don't be like this. Of course, it won't be easy for others to kill you." Madame Wu Yang bowed to Lu Ji. "Thank you, Lu Ji." Madame Wu Yang stood up and walked slowly to stand beside Lu Ji. Even Cho Miao had to admit that Madame Wu Yang was a natural beauty. The young hidden official was already squatting on the ground, rolling up the invaluable bamboo mat from Mount Qing. Compared to the Bamboo Sea Grotto Heaven wine, it was more authentic. Sword Immortal Cho Miao pretended not to see anything. Madame Wu Yang hesitated for a moment. She looked at the young man who was rolling up the bamboo mat and moving a step. She could not help but ask Lu Ji telepathically, "What is this?" Lu Ji smiled. "Our hidden official is too embarrassed to plunder the land of Spring Banner House. The ownerless Plum Blossom Garden is doomed." Cho Miao was even more confused. Judging from Great Sword Immortal Lu Ji's tone, it seemed that she had a good impression of this hidden official. Chen Pinggan finished rolling up the mat and tucked it under his arm. He stood up. "Lu Ji, let me say this first. The Plum Blossom Garden was able to take root in Inverted Mountain not only because of Madame Wu Yang's realm, but also because of scheming. Coincidentally, you are not good at it." Lu Ji glanced at Madame Wu Yang. "It's all right. As long as you don't care about your life, whether it's a cultivator or a plant spirit, it's all a matter of a sword." Lu Ji then said, "Chen Pinggan, you are good at messy scheming. Help me keep an eye on her in the future." Lu Ji then said to Madame Wu Yang, "To tell you the truth, I don't trust you for the time being. However, I can guarantee that after 1,000 years, you will regain your freedom. If my Dao ends prematurely and I die within 1,000 years, I will be handed over to Chen Pinggan. Wu Yang, if you think 1,000 years is too long, you can bargain with me. I won't agree to it." Madame Wu Yang smiled sweetly and curtsied to Lu Ji. She was graceful and charming. For a sword cultivator at Lu Ji's realm, the heart of the sword was especially clear. In addition to the many rumors about Lu Ji, Madame Wu Yang was willing to trust her. Cho Miao gave the hidden official a thumbs up. Indeed, it was more suitable for women to reason with each other. Chen Pinggan kept the bamboo mat within his reach. He then asked Lu Ji and Cho Miao to leave for a while, saying that he had something to ask Madame Wu Yang. The two sword immortals left the pavilion. Madame Wu Yang exclaimed in surprise and looked around. "Hidden official, you are so secretive. I haven't seen you for a few years and you are already a sword cultivator. This flying sword's natal supernatural power is so rare." There was a world of difference between Lu Ji's presence and absence. Chen Pinggan was not surprised at all. He asked, "Jiang Heng from Yugue sect came to Hanging Mountain once and stayed in the Plum Blossom Garden. What did the eldest son of the Jiang family want?" Madame Wu Yang asked in return, "Why don't you just ask about Old Dragon City and Osmanthus Island? Is it because you don't have the heart to ask but you have to? Or is it because you don't have the courage to ask?" Chen Pinggan frowned and said, "There is no need to ask about this." Madame Wu Yang smiled again and said, "Dare I ask, if you go to Osmanthus Island now, would you call Aunt Gui or Madame Gui?" Chen Pinggan did not answer the question. When you are by Lu Ji's side in the future, think about her more. The heart of a sword immortal is too pure. But without this heart of the sword, Lu Ji would not be the Lu Ji today. But when she goes to the vast world in the future, she may not be able to do everything smoothly. Madame Wu Yang's eyes lit up. "I don't have to stay in the Great Wall of Sword Qi?" Chen Pinggan nodded and said, "You will accompany Lu Ji to the South Hassa continent in the future." Madame Wu Yang smiled and said, "Since I can not only live, but also have no worries in the future, then I will answer all your questions and tell you everything I know. Let's talk about Jiang Heng first. He has great ambition but little talent. He is worlds apart from the border." Jiang Heng had his eyes on Fan family's Osmanthus Island, but Madame Gui did not agree. So he wanted to persuade my Plum Blossom Garden to help Yugue sect open up a new channel. The transit port is Luhua Island, where Qi cultivators gather pearls as their profession. Chen Pinggan asked, "Why not Rain Dragon sect?" Madame Wu Yang glanced at him and said, "Do you really not know, or are you pretending to be confused?" Chen Pinggan said, "Please tell me." Madame Wu Yang smiled and said, "Rain Dragon sect has a female ancestor. She once traveled to Tongya continent in her early years. Her heart and liver were crushed by Jiang Shangzhen, and she dropped her realm and returned. She was a good immortal in the embryo, but today, hundreds of years later, she just entered the pure jade realm. As Jiang Shangzhen's son, would Jiang Heng dare to go to Rain Dragon sect to seek death?" But today is different from the past. If Jiang Heng goes to Rain Dragon sect now, even if he is serious about seeking death, it will be difficult for him to die. Chen Pinggan sat on the long bench and rubbed the space between his eyebrows. As long as he was involved with Jiang Shangzhen, it was all those F*King accidents that made him scratch his head. How many consecrators in the world would send money to the mountain for expenses? However, the biggest surprise was that Jiang Shangzhen had now become the sect master of Jade Sec. Zun Yuan was really a terrifying person. In Chen Ping'an's heart, Zun Yuan's contribution to Jiang Shangzhen's success today could not go unnoticed. Personal grudges aside, in Chen Ping'an's opinion, Zun Yuan was the best when it came to being a sect master. Chen Pinggan still had lingering fears about Zun Yuan's scheme back then. Madame Wu Yang formed a seal and an old man's skin appeared in the pavilion. Chen Pinggan also kept it close to him. The questions and answers that followed in the pavilion were not sloppy. Finally, the group left Plum Blossom Garden. According to the heavenly secrets that Madame Wu Yang had revealed earlier, Plum Blossom Garden really knew how to run. However, where could they run to now? Moreover, Madame Wu Yang was following Lu Ji. Lu Ji brought her directly to the Great Wall of Sword Qi. Lu Ji had a private residence in the south of the city. Madame Wu Yang was temporarily staying there. Chen Pinggan and Chou Miao went to Spring Banner House. Madame Wu Yang had promised to record all the treasures of Plum Blossom Garden in a book. The book should be thick and would be sent to the Summer Palace. The nominal owner of Plum Blossom Garden was just a puppet that Madame Wu Yang had raised. There were many twists and turns in the story. If Madame Wu Yang was willing to tell and the young official was willing to record it, they could probably write a book of strange stories with hundreds of twists and turns. Chen Pinggan arrived at Spring Banner House. Miu and the other two went to the main hall to discuss matters. Xiao Yunyang had arrived at Inverted Hanging Mountain later than Lu Ji and had yet to return. It was not that Sword Immortal Xiao did not want to return with Lu Ji, but he could not catch up with Lu Ji on his sword. For the sake of speed, it was not easy to fly from Fuyao Continent to Inverted Hanging Mountain on a sword without taking the ferry. Not all the stewards of the 12 ferries who visited Spring Banner Shop tonight could take away a jade token. However, as long as they didn't have a good relationship with each other, these ferries who were used to the evils of Jianghu wouldn't talk about it easily after taking the jade tokens. Those who did not obtain it would probably want others to think that the jade token was in their pocket. Chen Pinggan did not go to the main hall. Instead, he found Wei Wenlong in the accounting room. Chou Miao did not want to face a pile of accounting books. In the Summer Palace, Chou Miao had flipped through many books to calculate. In Cao Gun's words, as long as he left the Summer Palace, he did not want to read a single page of books for the rest of his life. However, Chen Pinggan dragged Chou Miao to sit with him. When Wei Wenlong saw the young hidden official and sword immortal Chou Miao, he became even more fearful. Wei Wenlong moved some miscellaneous books over. Chen Pinggan picked one up and flipped it open. He was pleasantly surprised. One could tell whether a person was an expert with a single move. If this Wei Wenlong was just an empty shell, Chen Pinggan felt that he would eat the book in his hand. Because this miscellaneous book that Wei Wenlong used to pass the time was actually the Ministry of Revenue's secret records of the Aquarius Continent's Lu dynasty. It should be the contribution of Old Dragon City's intercontinental ferry. Wei Wenlong was a little uneasy. He braced himself and explained softly, "Hidden official, as long as I have nothing to do, I don't need to calculate. I just looked at these records of the destroyed dynasties of the various continents." The prices were not expensive. They were all bought one sack at a time. Compared to those rare items, it did not cost much. Also, because of my master's relationship, Old Dragon City's 6 ferries were very polite. They were all half sold and half given. Chen Pinggan patted Wei Wenlong's shoulder and smiled brightly. "I've met an expert." Wei Wenlong staggered. Actually, it was more of a shock. Wei Wenlong's smile was forced. His heart was anxious. As expected of the great sword celestial hidden official. The strength of his hands could be said to be terrifying. Chen Pinggan moved a chair and sat near Wei Wenlong. He began to ask about the tax situation of the Dali dynasty over the years. Wei Wenlong answered smoothly. He even talked about the little tricks of the Ministry of Revenue officials in the early years. However, he also said that the finance of the Dali dynasty's Ministry of Revenue in the past 100 years was getting more and more cloudy year by year. Moreover, for such a large dynasty, the transactions in the account books were illusory. The key was still to look at the secret collection of the mountain and mountain secret records. Otherwise, there was no need to mention the imitation Baek Okkyung building in Dallas capital. Just the mountain ferries and sword boats that the mechanical engineers of the School of Moism built for Dali cost a lot of celestial coins. Wei Wenlong guessed that other than the School of Moism, there must be a merchant supporting the financial operations of Dali behind the scenes. Otherwise, from the celestial coins on the mountain to the gold, silver, and copper coins at the foot of the mountain, they would have all collapsed and become rotten. Evidently, in order to truly grasp the matter of finance, Wei Wenlong needed to deeply understand a series of rules related to it. Chen Pinggan threw out an extremely small question, allowing Wei Wenlong to speak openly. When it came to matters of money, Wei Wenlong was another Wei Wenlong. He was knowledgeable in literature and science, skilled in laws and regulations, and skilled in writing and calculating. Chen Pinggan listened with rapt attention. This knowledge was truly valuable. The Cho Miao Sword Immortal was the first time he had seen such a young hidden official brimming with energy. Chen Pinggan suddenly said, "Once the matter is done, there is no interest." Wei Wenlong was taken aback. Then, he softly asked, "What is the way of governing a country?" Chen Pinggan smiled. "Everyone benefits at the end of the farm. There is no lack of closed markets." Wei Wenlong asked again, "What is the purpose?" Chen Pinggan answered, "Money wants to flow like water." Wei Wenlong grinned, unable to restrain his emotions. His hands pressed against the desk. He excitedly said, "Fellow Daoist, it really is a fellow Daoist." Then, Wei Wenlong was incomparably embarrassed. He resentfully withdrew his hands. He did his best to restrain the expression on his face, forcing himself to be as respectful as possible. He softly said, "Hidden official, I have offended you." Chen Pinggan laughed. "Fellow Daoist, offending him my ass. In the future, just call me Fellow Daoist Chen. Good Fellow Daoist is also fine." The Cho Miao Sword Immortal could not help but ask, "Are you guys discussing the knowledge of the merchant?" Chen Pinggan waved his hand. "There is a great connection, but you cannot mix them together." Wei Wenlong shot a glance at the Cho Miao Sword Immortal who was sitting there like a wooden person. Wei Wenlong almost could not resist rolling his eyes. As soon as he opened his mouth, he knew that he was an inexperienced layman, a complete mess. He was even a sword immortal. No wonder he could not become the hidden official of the Great Wall of Sword Qi. Chen Pinggan looked at the sky outside the window. He left a pot of Osmanthus wine on the table. He stood up and laughed. "You are welcome to visit our summer palace in the future. If you are willing to stay for a long time, even better. I will help you empty out a house. However, we have to wait until the 8 provinces ferry business is on the right track. Otherwise, it will inevitably delay official business. No rush, no rush. When I return to the summer palace, I will first help you clear out a house." Wei Wenlong stood up and said anxiously, "Hidden official, you cannot do this. You cannot do this." Chen Pinggan waved his hand. "Then it is settled." Leaving the house, Chen Pinggan habitually rubbed his hands together to keep warm. Cho Miao laughed. "In a good mood?" Chen Pinggan laughed. "In a very good mood. If there was a chance, he would definitely kidnap Wei Wenlong to Luopa Mountain in the future. He could very well use that lotus root blessed land for Wei Wenlong to practice." Cho Miao looked at the young hidden official who was laughing foolishly. He laughed and asked, "This Wei Wenlong, is he really that powerful?" Chen Pinggan nodded and said, "Give me a spring banner house in exchange, I won't trade." Cho Miao asked, "Then what about a plum blossom garden?" Chen Pinggan grumbled. "Great sword immortal Cho Miao, chatting like this is no fun." Cho Miao suddenly said telepathically, "The hidden official has so many plans. There is an effect." It can delay for half a year. If it is the 8 provinces ferry business, there is no big surprise. It will probably be another year. So there is still a year and a half left. Cho Miao was considered the best candidate for the next hidden official, or rather, one of them. Of course, it was not without reason. Chen Pinggan cursed. Cho Miao laughed and asked, "Who are you cursing?" Chen Pinggan said, "It is not Big Brother Sword Immortal." Cho Miao smiled and said, "I advise you not to treat me as mi you great sword immortal." Chen Pinggan said, "Don't do it again. Don't do it more than 3 times. Cho Miao said, "Just now, the way Wei Wenlong looked at me was not right." Chen Pinggan said, "How is that possible?" Wei Wenlong looked at you with eyes full of admiration. The only thing he did not see was Cho Miao as a beautiful woman. Cho Miao laughed and asked, "Hidden official, do you want to return to the summer palace with a bloody nose and a swollen face, or do you want Wei Wenlong to be hacked half to death by me?" Chen Pinggan laughed and said, "Don't do it more than 3 times. Before becoming the new hidden official. At the thatched cottage, Chen Pinggan and Big Brother Sword Immortal had a conversation. As the hidden official, as long as you can delay the Great Wall of Sword Chi for another 3 years, it will be enough. Or you can delay it for another 30 years. If you think you can do it, then agree now. I will help you go to the Ning mansion and the Yarrow family to propose marriage. Okay, no problem. Scram. After saying goodbye to Sister Bao Ping at the Cliff Academy, Pei Qian and Kui Dongshan left the capital of the Great Sui Kingdom. After a long journey, they were about to reach the border of the Huangting state, a vassal state of the Great Sui Kingdom. In the words of the Big White Goose, leisurely and carefree, following the Great Path. Along the way, Pei Qian, who was carrying a small bamboo box and holding a mountain staff, copied books every day without fail and performed the crazy demonic sword technique against Kui Dongshan. He had never lost. Otherwise, he would stare blankly at the ball of golden silk. It was the pure sword will that Zhu Cheng gifted to Pei Qian by the female sword immortal who swung at the Great Wall of Sword Chi. Pei Qian asked the Big White Goose many times, "Is this thing really inedible?" Sister Bao Ping and Li Huai liked to read the Jianghu romance. It was said that these treasures given by the elders could increase one's inner strength after eating them. Kui Dongshan said that it really could not be eaten. If he ate it, he would have to wait for his intestines to burst open. His hands would not be able to hold it all. Was he supposed to put it in the small box? How horrifying would that be? Today, the 2 of them were by the river. Kui Dongshan was fishing while Pei Qian was copying books beside him. He used the small box as a small table. It was a small green bamboo bookcase made by Kui Dongshan himself. Pei Qian reluctantly accepted it. He didn't like it, but he didn't directly say that he thought the color of the bookcase was not right. He just asked Kui Dongshan if he knew what green and glistening meant. Kui Dongshan also pretended not to hear the endless hints. Kui Dongshan was fishing while he talked about some fancy knowledge that Pei Qian could only hear from one ear and out the other. He talked about the path of practicing calligraphy, copying the ancient method, like a ghost enjoying a sacrifice, but sucking in its breath and not eating its quality. It was considered to have passed a threshold. He talked about how a child was just learning how to pick up a brush, but the frame should be tight, the strokes should be clear, and the words should not be exaggerated. Remember not to write too much, and it was best to write without gaps. There was also something about writing small characters, which should be clear and full. Pei Qian was very attentive when he was copying books. When he stopped writing, he did not like to listen to the Big White Goose's nonsense. "Big White Goose, is your calligraphy better than my master's? Look at my master. Does he have so many dirty sayings? Look at you showing off. Are you bullying me because I don't copy many books?" Kui Dongshan turned his head and looked at his senior sister who was focused on copying books and writing. He smiled. "Is my calligraphy good? Is it good?" Just by looking at how much a piece of calligraphy the size of 2 or 3 palms could sell for, one would know. Unfortunately, it was not good to say this. Otherwise, this senior sister would immediately go up the mountain and make 7 or 8 big bamboo boxes for him to fill up. Otherwise, she would not let him go. Furthermore, Not everything that was written with a brush could be considered a copybook. After copying the books, Pei Qian squatted on the ground and leaned against the small bamboo box. She quietly waited for the fish to take the bait. She had learned how to stew fish from her master. Kui Dongshan suddenly asked Pei Qian if she wanted to wander the Jianghu alone and return to her hometown, Luopo Mountain. Of course, Pei Qian did not dare to. Did the big white goose's brain get hit by the mountain staff? Asking this question would spoil the mood. Pei Qian immediately said no. She had to get her master's permission before she, as the first disciple, could go down the mountain alone. With the little donkey as her companion, they could travel the mountains and rivers together. Kui Dongshan said to go further. The Imperial River in Huangting country was where Chen Lingjun made his fortune. There was also the Cao family's Jilan restaurant, which was half of Nuanshu's hometown. Is she really not going to take a walk and take a look? Pei Qian carried the bamboo box and stood up. She began to walk around the big white goose. She grabbed the string of the small bamboo box with one hand and the mountain staff with the other. Stop talking nonsense. Traveling is a small matter, but returning home is a big matter. Without me watching over there, won't old chef's good cooking skills go to waste? Besides, if I don't watch over the shop, big sister Sharu likes to secretly buy rouge and face powder. What if she uses her position for personal gain? Kui Dongshan smiled and said, Sharu buys rouge and face powder? Why? Wipe it on your face and scare people to death first before scaring ghosts. Pei Qian frowned and said, Big white goose, you're not allowed to talk about big sister Sharu like that. It wasn't easy for her to secretly buy rouge and face powder, but she had to hide it carefully so that I wouldn't see it and laugh at her. Kui Dongshan chuckled and said, Then did you laugh at her? Pei Qian pulled a long face and held back her laughter. Kui Dongshan said, Teacher wasn't around again. Pei Qian laughed out loud. I was young at that time, and I was even younger. I didn't know any better, so I almost died laughing. I laughed so hard that my stomach hurt and I almost smacked a few holes in the counter. Pei Qian quickly added, But I only laughed. I didn't say anything disgraceful, not a single word. I swear to God. Kui Dongshan smiled and said, You were too busy laughing to speak, right? Pei Qian slapped Kui Dongshan's head and beamed. Little senior brother knows me best. Look at how smart you are. You caught a fish and stewed it in a big pot. After eating and drinking, we still have to go back together. Then Pei Qian was a little sad. Big sister Sharu is quite pitiful. Don't bully her in the future. Be reasonable and learn from teacher. Big sister Sharu is not stupid. She will listen. Of course, I didn't just say that casually. Pei Qian said softly, Little senior brother and teacher are both people who think a lot before doing things. I don't care too much. I can't even copy a book. Kui Dongshan stared at the water and raised his hand to rub his head. He said, When teacher was younger than you, he dared to leave the great Sui kingdom alone and walk back to his hometown. Pei Qian was puzzled and said, What's so strange about a disciple being inferior to teacher? Kui Dongshan said, A disciple doesn't have to be inferior to teacher. It's the teachings of a saint written in black and white. Pei Qian curled her lips and said, I only listen to teacher. Kui Dongshan said helplessly, I really have something urgent. I have to go to the capital of Dali immediately. Even taking a ferry is too slow. If I delay it, it will be difficult to meet big sister next time. I don't know how long it will take. Pei Qian thought for a moment and nodded. Okay, if you had begged me so bitterly earlier, it would have been over. Go. I will walk back to Luopa Mountain alone. It's a small matter. She took out a piece of yellow paper talisman from her sleeve. She did not immediately stick it on her forehead, but carefully hid it in her sleeve. She had walked thousands of mountains and rivers with teacher, so this talisman had accompanied her for almost the same time. With it, she was not afraid of anything. Kui Dongshan asked with a smile, Then I'm really going? Pei Qian said impatiently, So much nonsense. Do you think my crazy demon swordsmanship is vegetarian? Kui Dongshan sighed. Forget it, forget it. I'd better accompany big sister for a while. Otherwise, teacher will blame me when he finds out. Pei Qian stood beside the big white goose and said, "Go, go. Don't worry about me. I'm not even afraid of the great wall of sword qi of the sword cultivators. Why would I be afraid of Huangting country?" Kui Dongshan put away his fishing rod. "I'll send you off a little. Do you see the stone cliff over there? I'll send you there." Pei Qian and Kui Dongshan walked by the river and said softly, "Big white goose, can I tell you something from my heart?" "Sure. Actually, teacher is worried that I won't be sensible in the future. I can understand that. But teacher is worried that I will be like him in the future. I don't understand. What's wrong with being like teacher? Why don't you tell teacher directly? Teacher is already worried. If I say this, teacher will probably be even more worried. The more worried teacher is, the more worried I will be. Teacher who likes me the most as his first disciple will be worried again and again. Then I will be worried again and again." Kui Dongshan looked at the distant mountains and smiled. "My heart is calm. I laugh at the clouds for being troublesome. I come out of the mountains for the rain." Pei Qian frowned. "Are you mocking me in a roundabout way? I'm praising you. In all honesty. In all honesty." At last, Pei Qian stopped and said in a low voice, "Little senior fellow apprentice, be careful." Kui Dongshan smiled and nodded. "If I hadn't met teacher, how could I have such a nice big senior sister?" Kui Dongshan rose from the ground and returned to his hometown like a white cloud. However, Kui Dongshan did not leave. He cast the camouflage skill and looked down at the river. Pei Qian stood in the same place for a long time. Finally, she was willing to move and shake off her hands. Every step she took was huge, but she was a little slow. At this speed, it would take her 100 years to walk to the Chiduan mountain. Kui Dongshan rubbed between his eyebrows. What is she doing? After looking at her for a long time, the big senior sister seemed to be enlightened. She took a deep breath and stomped hard on the ground. In an instant, she rushed forward. In a flash, she was as fast as thunder. Kui Dongshan was even more worried. With grand senior sister's meager guts, if she really met those mountain spirits and ghosts, it would be you scaring me and me scaring you. They wouldn't delay each other and would scare each other to death together. Kui Dongshan looked around and flew away with the wind. He was as fast as lightning, but quietly went to a bigger river. He stomped his foot and directly shook the river god out of his nest. He grabbed the god's head and twisted his wrist so that his face was facing the petite figure carrying a bamboo box in the distance. Kui Dongshan said calmly, "Do you see, my big senior sister? You can escort her all the way to Red Candle Town. Don't show up and don't leave any clues. Then, you can go home. You'll be credited. After that, you'll get a Dali medallion. The Ministry of Rights of Dali will send it to you. Just wait at home. However, if there's any mistake, I'll destroy your golden body." At this point, Kui Dongshan increased the strength of his 5 fingers. The golden body of a water god exploded like a firecracker, causing countless cracks to appear on the spot. After retracting his hand, he said, "I keep feeling that you're unreliable. I'm afraid that you won't take it seriously. I'll shatter half of your golden body first. After that, go to the Iron Talisman River's water god, Yang Hua, and ask her to repair your golden body before taking the medallion." The water god heard the white-robed youth mutter to himself, "After shattering half of my golden body, I don't have any evil thoughts. However, my abilities are getting worse. Won't I be even more unreliable?" The water god's golden body almost collapsed completely. "This old immortal with powerful spells and an arrogant tone, what are you going to do? From the beginning to the end, I didn't say a single word, and I didn't do a single thing." Kui Dongshan loosened his fingers and gently patted the water god's head. The countless cracks in the golden body instantly closed and returned to normal. Kui Dongshan shook his sleeves and looked at the dumbfounded water god. He asked, "Why are you in a daze?" The golden body was shattered and repaired. "The taste is too good. Why don't you do it again?" The water god swallowed his saliva and was about to chase after the so-called eldest senior sister. In the end, he was slapped into the river by the white-robed youth, causing countless waves to splash. He said angrily, "Are you going just like that? I told you not to leave any traces. Kui Dongshan slapped his head. You should look for the mountain god. It's my fault. I'm sorry. Where did you come from? He did not expect the water god to not be too stupid. He actually endured the changes in the golden body and the intense pain caused by the kick. He knelt and kowtowed on the water surface. Greetings, immortal master. Kui Dongshan smiled and said, as expected of General Liu, who dared to draw the ground with his halberd when he was just a small river earl back then, and said to the neighboring mountain gods that no one dared to offend Liu Gongjie. Stand up and speak. Look at how smart you are. Not bad, not bad. I believe that although you are a water god, even if you enter the mountain, you will not be too bad. However, to be careful, I'll give you a water god mountain crossing talisman. Kui Dongshan closed his fingers and a golden talisman appeared out of thin air. He gently threw it down and was caught by the water god. When he looked up again, the white-robed youth had already disappeared. The water god with the surname Liu obtained the water god mountain crossing talisman that he had never heard of. He realized that he could fuse with the golden body after circulating his spiritual energy slightly. After carefully going ashore, he could move more freely than in the waters. The water god felt like he was dreaming. He immediately hid his aura and chased after the young lady. Just as the water god heaved a sigh of relief, ripples appeared in his heart lake like a raging wave. The water god had no choice but to stop in his tracks to resist it with all his might. It was the white-robed youth's voice again. Remember, don't easily get within 1,000 feet of my eldest senior sister. Otherwise, you will still be discovered with the talisman. You will have to consider the consequences. When the time comes, it will be hard to say if this talisman is a life-saving talisman or a life-hastening talisman. The water god immediately bowed and cupped his fists to accept the order. After that, the water god only had one feeling as he followed the young lady who was running far away. The young lady looked young, but she could really run. If she was hungry, she would take off the small bamboo box as she ran. She would open the bamboo box and take out some dry food. She would carry the small bamboo box and eat it before continuing to run. The water god initially thought that the young lady was hiding from something. However, no matter how the water god searched, there were no signs. However, the water god was increasingly puzzled. This young lady was not an immortal who cultivated Tao techniques. How did she become a martial arts grandmaster who tempered one's body the most? Along the way, the young lady encountered caves that sheltered her from the wind and rain. She did not go there. She did not go to abandoned and dilapidated temples. She did not go to places with slightly more spiritual energy. It was not easy for her to get tired from running and take a break. She also deliberately chose to use the mountain staff to draw a huge circle in the middle of the day. She mumbled and then closed her eyes for a while. She would take a nap and quickly get up to continue her journey. When the young lady jumped onto a high branch again, she saw the outline of a city in the distance. The young lady frowned as though she was crying. The water god had just pitied the young lady. He saw the young lady land on the ground and swagger as she walked leisurely. She swung her mountain staff and hummed about eating stinky tofu. The stinky tofu was delicious. The water god naturally did not know. On a high branch, the white-robed youth stood there quietly. His expression was gentle as he looked at Pei Qian from afar. Only Kui Dongshan knew why. When Sir was not by her side, or when she was not at Sir's house. Then, all the places she went alone would be the same as the lotus blossom blessed land when she was young. Everyone she met alone would be the same as the people she met on the streets of the lotus blossom blessed land. They were no different. Kui Dongshan surveyed his surroundings. There were mountains after mountains. A person's murmur echoed through the mountains. He hoped so. Kui Dongshan sighed. He was finally willing to leave. He still had to meet an important figure on behalf of the old bastard. A white robe soared into the clouds and smashed through the sea of clouds. A series of muffled thunder boomed in the sky as though they were bidding farewell. Pei Qian, who was walking in the forest, was originally happily mumbling about the arrogant fiendish demon. She was taken aback and hurriedly turned around. She raised her head and jumped up as she waved goodbye. The water god realized that the young lady did not stay in an inn even when she arrived at a small town in the county. At most, she would buy some snacks and put some in her pockets. Most of them were placed in small bamboo chests. Then, she would go to the mountains and rivers to pay her respects. When she encountered a daoist temple, she would also burn incense. Outside of that, she almost did not speak to anyone. It was just that her footsteps were much slower than walking in the mountains and rivers. She did not need to bury her head in running. The only time she stayed in the same place for a long time was when she squatted on a low yellow wall and looked at a group of wandering pugilistic heroes on horseback. The young lady seemed to be envious. However, it was not those seemingly awe-inspiring pugilistic people, but their mounts. On the Huangting country's imperial river, the young lady took a look and ran. When she arrived near the Cao clan's Jilan building, it was about the same. She sneaked a few glances on the streets and ran. Finally, she arrived at the boundary of Red Candle Town. The water god felt relieved. At the same time, he did not know whether to laugh or cry. The young lady was so cautious. Why would she need him to protect her? Could it be that he had obtained a rare talisman for free? Was there really a Dali talisman that he could take? The water god did not dare to believe it. It did not matter. He followed the white-robed immortal master's instructions and stopped here and returned home. The water god turned around and left. Along the way, apart from a few chi refinement warriors of the middle 5 realms, no one knew that he, the righteous god of the river, had come ashore to swim. Even if the cultivators saw him, they did not dare to take a second look. How could a righteous god of the river be simple if he dared to go ashore openly against the rules? How harsh were the laws of Dalis mountains and rivers now? The water god suddenly turned his head. He realized that the young lady had run all the way over and stopped at a spot that was neither too far nor too close. She stabbed the mountain traveling staff heavily on the ground and cupped her fists at him with a smile before bowing. After the young lady stood up, the water god only smiled and cupped his fists in return. It was fine if he bowed in return. The young lady grinned and said, "My master is the mountain master of Luorpa Mountain. Lord Water God, you are welcome to visit my house in the future." The water god was stunned for a long time before nodding. Did this lass forget to report her name? However, the young lady had already picked up the mountain traveling staff and turned to leave. She skipped and swayed the small bamboo box on her back. 640 Luo Po Mountain, late nights for snow. Zhu Lian was very arrogant. Rain comes again and again. Snow comes again when it's not sunny. My hometown's scenery is the most beautiful. Today, Zhu Lian and Zheng Dafeng were playing chess and complaining to each other. Zhu Lian complained that Brother Dafeng's gaze was too righteous and scared away the yellow court fairy. Zheng Dafeng complained that old chef's culinary skills were not good enough and could not keep the fairy, causing Luo Po Mountain to lose a nascent soulsword cultivator in name. It was a big sin and he had to take out a few precious immortal books for Zheng Dafeng to take care of. Wei Pai sat at the side and did not understand why the two of them were still arguing after so long. After thinking about it again, he figured it out. Was the yellow court fairy beautiful enough? Zhu Lian looked at Wei Pai and asked with a smile, "I heard that I'm going to the capital to meet the emperor soon and see if I can get some dragon chi back to throw into the blessed land. That's the right way to travel." Zheng Dafeng agreed. Indeed, Mountain Lord can't just watch the game and not do anything. Wei Pai was helpless. Now, the name of Mountain Lord Bei Yu had spread to the North Continent. It was the kind of wild chicken that could not leave without laying an egg. However, his efforts were not in vain. In the new Lotus Root blessed land, after spending a few thousand grain rain coins, not only did it become a medium-grade blessed land, but it also had a new atmosphere. The spirits of the mountains and rivers, lonely souls and wild ghosts, as well as the heroic spirits of the land, sprang up like bamboo shoots after the rain. However, in terms of overall numbers, there would be a bottleneck. However, as long as enough immortal coins were spent, the sky would be higher and the land would be wider. The matter of fate would become stronger and the previous bottleneck would be naturally broken. What interested Zheng Dafeng the most was a book about a scholar and a beauty that was popular in the Nanyuan kingdom. The woman in the book appeared in the world with a demonic body. She was actually born from induction. However, her spiritual intelligence had not yet been developed and she was still a little muddle-headed. She liked to float around and secretly look at the unfamiliar world among the books and paintings. Her appearance was a rare thing in the vast world. She and the little girl Chen Nuanshu lived in a different world. The birth of this unknown woman was purely the condensation of strands of the hearts of people from all over the world. It could be considered as a comparatively unconventional manifestation of the Grand Tao. However, no matter how mediocre it was still a manifestation of the Great Tao. Even if it had a little bit of Tao, it was still a big deal. If it was in other blessed lands, once discovered, they would definitely be arrested. There was no need to worry about buyers at all. They could casually sell it for an unimaginable sky-high price. Fortunately, he was born in the Lotus Root blessed land and had such a well-behaved young mountain chieftain. He reckoned that his luck in the future would not be too bad. Zheng Dafeng wiped his mouth. It's a place worth visiting. A delicate and timid young lady and a great hero who has tender and protective feelings for the fairer sex. Neither of them could be missing. So that we won't fall into the hands of those lonely souls and malicious ghosts. However, Zhu Lian said, I don't think it's a bad idea to just stay on the mountain. Zhu Lian always had a hidden worry in his heart. The Lotus Root blessed land of the past and the Lotus Root blessed land of the present. Zhu Lian always vaguely felt that the old Abidin's plan was very far-reaching. As long as one entered the blessed land, no matter who it would not be easy. Wei Pai also said, since you've chosen to live a leisurely life, you might as well live this leisurely life until you're old. Zheng Dafeng laughed. What are you thinking about? Our Luo Po mountain is a gathering of heroes. There's no need for me to do anything. I'm really just going to stroll around and relax. Zheng Dafeng's Go skills were actually better than Zhu Lian's and Wei Bian's. Therefore, it was very easy for him to play Go. Now that Zhu Lian was deep in thought, Zheng Dafeng picked up a folding fan on the table. Fanning himself in the middle of winter was outrageous. He just had to go through the motions. He held it in his sleeve. Such an elegant thing in the hands of a handsome man like him was really amazing. As long as a woman was not blind, she would like it. Even if she did not like it, she would just pretend not to like it. At the moment, other than Pei Qian who was still wandering outside, Old Master Zhong had brought Cao Qinglang to the South Po continent to travel. It was actually quite lively. As Yuanlai and Yuanbao had stayed on the mountain to cultivate, Zheng Dafeng wanted to sincerely teach Yuanbao fist techniques. However, the girl was too shy and thin-skinned. Like Center Yuanji, she could only learn from an old man. Yuanlai wanted to learn from Zheng Dafeng, but Zheng Dafeng was not too willing to teach. He only taught him some miscellaneous knowledge from books. The young man was privately scolded by his sister many times. Other than that, at the sword-worshipping terrace of Luo Po Mountain, there were 3 more anonymous disciples who lived there in seclusion. They were 3 true foreigners from the Great Wall of Sword Qi. The Aurus Core sword cultivator Kui Wei. They were said to be 2 shop assistants from a shop, Zhong Jiazhen and Jiang Chu. The 3 of them did not take the ferry from Old Dragon City to the north continent of the northern continent directly to the Oxhorn Mountain ferry. Instead, they took a short-distance ferry to the north and followed the underground river that was said to have been dug by a real dragon. Carrying the 3 customs clearance documents and a Great Li peace tablet, they traveled all the way to the north. Finally, they passed by Red Candle Town, Chiduan Mountain, and entered the boundary of Luopa Mountain. Finally, under Zhu Lian's arrangement, they settled down at the sword-worshipping terrace quietly. As the 3 of them were only registered disciples of Luo Po Mountain, they did not have to burn incense and worship statues for the time being. With Zhu Fei's extravagant spending, he built mansions on all the vassal mountains of Luo Po Mountain. In Zhu Fei's words, he wanted them to be as expensive as possible. Don't save money for me. How did the divine qi on the mountain come about? It came from the divine money, which stank the most of money, piled up one by one. Kui Wei hid his identity. During his previous journey, He had a rough idea of the value of a golden core sword cultivator in the vast world. A golden core chi refinement warrior could hold the peak opening ceremony. It was a ceremony that was highly valued by all the immortals in the vast world. What more a nascent soul sword cultivator? However, Kui Wei was even more restrained than Zhong Jiazhen and Jiang Chu. He was almost timid. When Kui Wei left the Great Wall of Sword Chi, other than his natal flying sword, he only brought two things with him. One was a robe and the other was a sword workshop standard. Zhong Jiazhen received a copybook written by Mr. Chen himself. She read it in a sunny manner. The first and second seals were stamped on both sides. Jiang Chu received a stack of talisman from Mr. Chen. Among them, there was a talisman made of gold. Zheng Dafeng asked, "Old chef, are we going to leave the two young men at the sword-worshipping terrace?" "I don't think that's a good idea. Why don't we send them to the auspicious year shop and get some popularity?" Wei Pai smiled and said, "You can't say that. Zhong Jiazhen and Jiang Chu were born in the marketplace. They don't lack this." Zheng Dafeng smiled and said, "I think that Zhong Jiazhen is not bad. I want to matchmake him and Xiao Ju. The three of us will be cooped up in bed every night. Comfortable? Do we want these juniors to follow in our footsteps? I don't think so. Absolutely not." The auspicious year shop was owned by Sharu. There were 3 honorary consecrators living at the straw head shop. The blind old daoist, Jiao Cheng, the lame young man, Zhao Dungao, and the young lady, Tian Jue. Zhu Lian smiled and said, "The 2 young men from outside the sword-worshipping terrace should be promising. However, they are a late bloomer. We need to wait patiently." Wei Pai said, "Even if they don't want to be promising, they have to ask Zhu Fei for permission." Zhu Lian and Zheng Dafeng nodded in unison. "That makes sense." Zheng Dafeng said, "Get Nuanshu to record this matter. The next time we have a meeting in the ancestral hall, take it out and let brother Zhu Fei take a look." Chen Nuanshu finished her work and ran over to watch the game of chess. Chen Lingjun yawned and walked into the courtyard. When he saw Chen Nuanshu, he smiled and said, "Little fool, you haven't refined that Dragon King basket of yours yet?" Before Chen Pinggan left Luopa Mountain, he gave the pair of Dragon King baskets he obtained from the ruins of the immortal abode in the North Continent to Chen Nuanshu and Chen Lingjun respectively. He let them refine it and use it as a trump card for Luopa Mountain's vassal mountain, Yellow Lake Mountain. Chen Lingjun had already succeeded in refining it, but Chen Nuanshu's progress was slow. However, this was only slow compared to Chen Lingjun. A guy who was almost brought to the Qingming world by Lu Chen naturally had good aptitude. Chen Nuanshu was dejected. She remained silent and clenched her sleeves tightly with her small hands. Wei Pai reached out and pressed Chen Lingjuan's head. He bent over and asked with a smile, "What?" Chen Lingjun blinked and said seriously, "Nuanshu, when it comes to cultivation, hard work is enough. Don't be anxious. It's easy to spoil things if you're anxious. You have to learn from our master. Only by walking slowly can you punch quickly." Wei Pai patted Chen Lingjuan's head, "If you keep talking like this, when Pei Qian returns to Luopa Mountain, you'll have to deal with it yourself." Chen Lingjun almost knelt down in front of Wei Pai. Chen Lingjun immediately stood on his tiptoes and placed his hands on Wei Pai's shoulders. He smiled flatteringly and asked the standing Wei Pai to sit down and talk so that he could massage his master's shoulders. North Continent's Taihui Sword Clan, the number 1 clan in the North Continent. Sword Immortal Qi Jinglong's direct disciple, White Head, was powerful, right? After being kicked by Pei Qian, he fell to the ground and twitched. The most terrifying thing was that Pei Qian held a grudge. Center Yuanji, Yuan Bao, and Yuan Lai also came to the courtyard to relax during their training. As soon as they arrived, they saw Chen Lingjun helping Wei Pai massage his shoulders and back while praising brother Fengfeng for having a good mood. If this fan had a spirit and was enlightened, he would be grateful to the point of tears and snot. He was glad that he had accumulated good karma in his previous life, which allowed him to fall into the hands of brother Fengfeng in this life. Chen Nuanshu gave up his seat. Center Yuanji and Yuan Lai did not sit. Yuan Bao thanked him and sat down. Chen Lingjun rolled his eyes hard. This little girl that Lu Baixiang picked up was the most king ignorant. Look at the people that his master picked up. With him as the leader, which one of them was not a genius? Little Millet was still squatting at Chiduan Mountain, waiting for Pei Qian, right? She was even carrying a big bag of melon seeds. Little Millet's conscience was bigger than a bowl. Yuan Bao was lucky to have arrived at Luopa Mountain late. All the people with special abilities had risked their lives for Master Chen to get a feel for them. He had personally fought Lu Chen, Wan Qi, and Old Yang. Otherwise, with Yuan Bao's temper, his little head would have been smashed into pieces. Zhu Lian smiled. Yuan Bao, do you have something to say? Yuan Bao nodded. I can wait for old Mr. Zhu to finish his chess game. Although the young girl showed off her abilities, she still had etiquette. Moreover, Yuan Bao had a very good impression of old Mr. Zhu Lian. The bad one was Zheng Dafeng. The normal one was the great mountain lord who came to Luopa Mountain for a stroll. When old Mr. Zhu went to Lotus Root Blessed Land, he only brought out an extremely long painting scroll that was hidden in a secret place. It was the proud work of a master painter from his hometown in the early years. It was rich, prosperous, and bustling with activity. It was a prosperous era. At that time, Pei Qian's eyes were sharp. He noticed that there were not horses in the painting, but cattle, donkeys, and mules. He lamented that there were so many donkeys. If he gritted his teeth and took out a piece of snow to spend money, would he be able to buy 100 of them? Yuan Bao and Yuan Lai were also present. Yuan Lai looked for the bookstore in the painting scroll. After glancing at the painting scroll, Yuan Bao sneered. The signs of decline were obvious. Zhu Lian nodded. It made sense. In fact, the painting scroll was the capital city where Zhu Lian lived. In less than 60 years, all the beautiful scenery was crushed by the horses' hooves. Even though Zhu Lian tried his best, he still could not turn the tide. In the end, he left the court and returned to Jianghu. From a noble son, he became a scholarly general, and finally a martial arts madman. In that life, Zhu Lian had 3 things that he was most proud of in his life. Writing books. Even Kui Dongshan thought that Zhu Lian's xiajie was excellent. Creating double-entry bookkeeping. He casually wrote a martial arts secret book. The threshold was not high, and the breakthrough was fast. The only thing that was difficult was to reach the top. He wrote 99 books in one go and gave them away to people in Jianghu. Scholars, common people, and Jianghu. Looking back on his life, whether it was a noble son or a martial arts madman, he had an explanation. Zhu Lian put the white chess piece back into the box and asked with a smile, Yuan Bao, it's hard to decide the winner in a short time. We'll have to wait until we finish this game. You go first. Zheng Dafeng began to eat sunflower seeds. Wei Pai did not say much. In a chess game, as long as Zhu Lian did not deliberately think long, Zheng Dafeng would finish the game in a few moves. Yuan Bao said, I have some thoughts about the blessed land of lotus roots. I'll say whatever I want. If there's anything wrong, please forgive me. Zhu Lian smiled and said, just say it. Whether it's right or wrong, it's not up to me to decide. We can argue, discuss, and reason with each other. Yuan Bao liked this old senior's open-mindedness and openness. Therefore, he never restrained himself when he was with him. Yuan Bao said in a low voice, print some shallow immortal spells into books and let the emperors of the 4 countries issue imperial edicts. Everyone must learn it. Then spread the martial arts secret books. There's no threshold. Even if one's aptitude is bad and can't learn any immortal spells, there's still the martial Tao. Whether they succeed or not, the opportunity has been given. They can climb up with their own ability. Otherwise, we'll spend so much grain rain money just to watch the fun. We have to make a profit, right? Yuan Lai said softly, it'll be very troublesome for the imperial court and the government to prohibit martial arts. The whole blessed land of lotus roots will be very difficult to control. If they're not careful, the government will be reduced to a decoration. Once the government and the imperial court lose their dignity, the operation of the whole system of mountains and rivers will be in big trouble. Cao Qinglang once said that a world, no matter how small it is, still requires stability. Yuan Bao sneered and said, "Those old emperors and officials are unwilling to do anything or can't do it well. Then we'll just replace them with a group of obedient puppets who dare to kill, can suppress the Qi refinement warriors on the mountain, and can kill the grandmasters of the pugilistic world." Taking a step back, "I'm really afraid that the place is small and the small pond can't keep the flood dragon. It's simple too. Once there are good seedlings, we'll just grab them from the blessed land and raise them in Luo Po Mountain. There are so many mountains and so many immortal residences. Even if they're empty, they'll be empty. For example, Qi refinement warriors who have a chance to reach the cave abode realm and martial artists who are already at the 6th realm can become the unofficial disciples of Luo Po Mountain. Once they've accumulated enough merit, they'll have a position, better fist technique secret books, and more advanced immortal spells to learn." Yuan Lai's voice became softer and softer. "What about people's hearts? How can it be so simple? Sister, there are so many complicated human relationships at Master's Mountain alone." Yuan Bao glared at this bookworm of a younger brother. He was so troublesome. No wonder he got along so well with Cao Qinglang. Zhu Lian did not speak at all. The young lady's words could not be said to be completely right or completely wrong. It's just that some things were interconnected. It was not as simple as the increase and decrease of immortal spells. Instead, it was like the building of a house. If one beam was crooked, after some time, the house would collapse. However, it was a good thing to be able to think and speak more. Hence, Zhu Lian was not in a hurry to refute or acknowledge anything. He only smiled at the young lady, hinting for her to be bolder and continue speaking her thoughts. Yuan Bao crossed her arms and said with narrowed eyes, "The reason why Master's hands are tied is because the situation is too chaotic. Lotus Root Blessed Land is different from Luo Po Mountain. Here, Luo Po Mountain is the heavens of the entire Blessed Land. As a human, who isn't afraid of death and who doesn't care about their lives, we rule the world and our spells are so mysterious. Under the big picture, what's the human heart? Perhaps it's too late to rely on Luo Po Mountain." Zheng Dafeng said with a smile, "When I was young, I was afraid that studying was difficult. When I was young, I always felt that it was easy to be a human." Young Yuan Lai immediately remembered it in his heart. Uncle Zheng's knowledge was not small. Zhu Lian scratched his head and said with a sigh, "Yesterday, the young man was riding a childhood sweetheart. Why is it a Chinese pulsatilla tonight?" Wei Pai smiled and asked, "Yuan Bao, I have a question. When this group of people arrives at the vast world and is raised on Luo Po Mountain's vassal mountains, what will they do in the future?" Yuan Bao already had a plan in mind and blurted out, "Continue to cultivate or supervise them to practice martial arts. As long as the Qi refinement warriors become Dragon Gate cultivators or Realm 7 martial arts masters, they will be sold to the various forces in the Aquarius continent to form good karma and earn a lot of money. Those who are ambitious and unwilling to be reduced to goods can sign a contract with Luo Po Mountain. After leaving Luo Po Mountain, for a few decades or 100 years, just casually agree on a number of years. Let this group of people use money to buy their lives and freedom." Wei Pai asked again, "Among this group of people, if someone is evil and causes chaos, who will be responsible for this mess?" Yuan Bao frowned and said, "Why do you care about this? In the pugilistic world, one is responsible for one's life and death. One can only blame oneself. If one is not capable, one will be trampled on. Those with bigger fists have more reason. This has always been the way of the world on the mountain and at the foot of the mountain. Why should it be our Luo Po Mountain's fault?" Zhu Lian was still as calm as usual. Zheng Dafeng rolled his eyes. Wei Pai stretched out 2 fingers and twirled the gold earring. He was also a little worried. Lu Baixiang really saved him a lot of trouble when teaching his disciples. Yuan Bao clenched his fists and said in a deep voice, "In the Lotus Root Blessed Land, we are the heavens. We control them everywhere. Those who obey us will prosper and those who defy us will die. In the future, when they walk out of Luo Po Mountain, they will have nothing to do with our Luo Po Mountain. There will only be business left. What birth of heaven and earth? This is a great world that our Luo Po mountain spent a few thousand grains of grain rain money to create. In the future, we will continue to spend more and more grain rain money. Why should we? Yuan Bao was a little annoyed. The formation of those heavenly materials and earthly treasures is too slow. How fast can the gathering of spirit energy to form a cultivation treasure land be? Are we going to lose money like this? It is not easy for my master to earn money. It is very tiring. Unlike some people, sitting on the mountain top to bask in the sun, play chess, and admire the snow. Zhu Lian smiled and waved his hand. Yuan Bao, in our Luo Po mountain, even if we don't talk about it now, even if we quarrel in the future, we have to remember the words talk about the matter. Otherwise, even if you are right, you are unreasonable. Yuan Bao nodded. I will listen to old Mr. Zhu. Zheng Dafeng chewed on his melon seeds. He really felt a little guilty after hearing the little girl's words. Yuan Bao took a deep breath. His eyes were firm as he glanced at Zheng Dafeng and Wei Pai. If any of you don't like them, fine. In the future, I will be responsible for punching them and cleaning up the sect. Just treat it as raising a good-for-nothing trash for nothing. Senta Yuanji hoped that this good sister of hers would say less, so she kept winking. After a long time, she could no longer move her eyelids. Senta Yuanji began to rub her eyes. Yuan Bao gently pinched Senta Yuanji's arm, indicating that he understood. In the entire Luo Po mountain, Senta Yuanji was the most pleasing to the eye. She was his friend. As for the rest, if they were not here to make a living, they were here to scam others. If not, they were here to be cheeky. There were also those who were muddle-headed and who knew what they were thinking all day long. Yes, that girl Nuanshu was an exception. She was diligent and stood aloof from worldly affairs. She was still very pleasing to the eye. Zhu Lian said, Yuan Bao, I have a rough idea of your thoughts and have noted them down. Don't worry, I will not leave you hanging on purpose. Perhaps during the next meeting at the Ancestral Hall, I will bring up your thoughts and bring them up alone. The meeting at the Ancestral Hall is not child's play. Every word has to be recorded. Therefore, you should think more carefully in the near future to prevent others from finding loopholes. I will give you a suggestion. Do you want to listen? Yuan Bao smiled and said, Old Mr. Zhu, please speak. Zhu Lian looked at the trembling youth, Yuan Lai, and said, Didn't Yuan Lai have some objections? Then you should put down your sister's airs and try to calm down. Convince Yuan Lai first. Think about it. If you can't even convince Yuan Lai, even if I am willing to put this matter on the agenda of the Ancestral Hall, do you really think you have the confidence? Isn't this the case? Yuan Bao thought for a moment, then nodded and said, Okay. Zhu Lian said, In the various parts of Luo Po mountain outside the Ancestral Hall, the cultivation of the Great Tao follows their own path. However, once you enter the Ancestral Hall and take a seat, everyone's words have to be carefully considered. This sentence is still a matter of fact. It's not that I am taking advantage of my seniority to target you, Yuan Bao, or that I feel that the little girl is too sharp and needs to be suppressed. Our Luo Po mountain does not have such a mess of bad rules. There are none now, and there will be none in the future. Yuan Bao smiled and said, Old Mr. Zhu has always been magnanimous. Yuan Bao will not let his imagination run wild. Zheng Dafeng sighed. No matter what the old chef said, the little girl would listen to it. There were so many immortal books, but they were all bought by the old chef and hidden in the mountain. Why was he the only one who idled around? Comparisons were odious. Yuan Bao brought his good friend Senta Yuanji and his stubborn brother, and left the courtyard in high spirits. Chen Lingjun muttered, What a domineering little girl. Zhu Lian smiled and said, Luo Po mountain should have such thoughts, to fight and compete, the more the better. So I will tell you in advance, no matter what the final result of the Ancestral Hall meeting is, you are not allowed to hurt the little girl's heart. Wei Pai shook his head and said, This is not to say that there are no benefits. In fact, there are many blessed lands in the world that follow this path. Doing this is not even as direct as what Yuan Bao said. On one hand, it is too cheap, and its reputation is too bad. In the future, if they want to become a sect and then be promoted to a proper sect, there will be great resistance. On the other hand, just as Yuan Lai was worried, Yuan Bao still underestimated the human heart. The more great Dao seeds or martial Dao geniuses, not to mention all, most of them will rebel and become enemies with Luo Po Mountain. In the end, it is easy to drain the pond to fish. Zheng Dafeng said, "What realm is the little girl at now? It's already not easy to have such vision." Wei Pai's face suddenly darkened. Zheng Dafeng asked, "Did something happen to Xiaomi?" Wei Pai only had a subtle feeling before, so he immediately used his divine ability to observe the mountains and rivers. Unexpectedly, Chen Lingjun had already flown up on the wind and left Luo Po Mountain like a green rainbow. Wei Pai smiled and said, "Pei Qian is already protecting Xiaomi." Zhu Lian said indifferently, "Wei Pai, don't worry about this matter. Luo Po Mountain will take care of it." Wei Pai did not mind and nodded. "If I do, it will be difficult for me to do so. Coincidentally, I have to go to the capital for a meeting. I will leave first, you guys can do whatever you want." Zhu Lian suddenly became bashful. "This is so embarrassing. It's quite embarrassing." Wei Pai smiled and asked, "Then I'll leave later." Zhu Lian had already stood up. "Mountain Lord, important matters are important. Go early and return early. It's best if you bring back a few windfalls." Wei Pai's figure dissipated, and he was thousands of miles away in an instant. Zheng Dafeng gestured for Nuanshu to not be nervous and not to follow Chen Lingjun to Red Candle Town where the three rivers converged. Zheng Dafeng continued to eat melon seeds. "How can our Luo Po Mountain be bullied in our own territory? Are you kidding me?" Afterward, Zheng Dafeng rubbed his chin. Fortunately, the young mountain chieftain wasn't at the mountain top. Otherwise, with Chen Pingan's current temperament, he would most likely send a punch down first. At most, he would find a secluded place and cut off some river before reasoning with him. Emperor Dalis' imperial study was actually not very big. However, if one wanted to enter and sit down to talk, their official had to be big enough, or their realm was high enough. The young emperor, Song He, was resting with his eyes closed. He had made an exception today for the sake of the upcoming discussion. And the situation was special. Most of them were cultivators. Dallas officials could be counted on one hand. There were only 3 of them, the Minister of Rights and 2 assistant ministers. Song He opened his eyes. There was about half an hour left. The young emperor glanced at the desk. There was Li Yingqiu's landscape painting, which was placed here by the previous emperor. After Song He inherited the throne, he did not take anything from the room. He only added a few items. Then, he felt that it was too bloated, so he quietly removed some. The scroll containing Li Yingqiu's landscape painting was a sea of celadon brushes made in the dragon kill of Liju Grotto Heaven in the early years. It was actually quite an eyesore. Li Yingqiu was not from the mountain. The zither, chess, calligraphy, and painting at the foot of the mountain had never entered the eyes of the immortals on the mountain. However, there were exceptions. Li Yingqiu was an inescapable figure in the history of painting in the Great Sui Kingdom. Not only was he loved by the Song clan, but many immortals on the mountain in the Aquarius continent also liked him. In the Sea of Brushes, other than Li Yingqiu's green landscape painting, there was also Bian Yi's flower and bird painting. Song He glanced at the scrolls in the Sea of Brushes. The young emperor wanted to apologize to Li Yingqiu. He had wronged Li Yingqiu's landscape painting to be placed next to Bian Yi's flower and bird painting. Song He's impression of Bian Yi was very poor. Whether it was his painting or his character, he felt that Bian Yi was not presentable. Bian Yi was a destitute painter from the old Lu dynasty. He moved to Dali, a vassal state. He was one of the few foreigners who took root here. Therefore, he was highly regarded by the Emperor Dali of that generation. All of his paintings were stamped with the seals of the 2 emperors Dali. Bian Yi probably did not expect that in less than 100 years after his death, because he could not survive in the Lu dynasty, he ran to Dali to make a living. Now, he had inexplicably become the saint of the painting world of the Aquarius continent. Words such as best at breaking the branches of flowers and birds, exquisite design, rich and beautiful, exquisite attainments, can be said to be the standard of the ancient times, countless words of praise appeared in Song his mind. When Song he was young, he listened to the teachings of some princes here. Some people had the same opinion as Song he. They said that Bien Yi's paintings were too rich and beautiful. The previous emperor did not comment on whether the paintings were good or bad. He only said that in the future, no matter who the owner of this room was, whether they liked it or not, this person's paintings must be kept. But in the sea of brushes, there was a piece of calligraphy that was worthy of its name. It was called, "Returning to My Hometown." It could even be called the #1 treasure in Dallas imperial study. That was a piece of calligraphy by Song his teacher, the imperial tutor of the Dali dynasty, Kui Dong. Of course, it was authentic. Kui Dong's calligraphy, especially the cursive, was superb. It was recognized by the entire world as 1,000 pieces of gold. In the past, the first disciple of the sage of literature's lineage, embroidered tiger Kui Dong, was worthy of the word embroidered, just like Chen Chun and of the Hassa continent was worthy of the word Chun. Kui Dong had 4 pieces of calligraphy between the flowers, 4 pieces above the clouds, 4 pieces by the spring, and 4 pieces on the mountain peak. A total of 16 pieces were passed down. The 16 pieces were scattered in the 9 continents and all fell into the hands of famous collectors. One of the great cultivators of the Middle Continent had a deep relationship with Kui Dong. He spent a lot of money to buy 2 pieces of calligraphy. He destroyed the beggars rice calligraphy and fight for the throne calligraphy in public. It was regarded as a magnificent feat and was very satisfying. It was only 100 years later that the truth was revealed. This old cultivator, who claimed to be the person who spurned Kui Dong, is the #1 in the world, had his secret revealed by his descendants. Only then did outsiders know that this old bastard had only destroyed 2 pieces of calligraphy and hidden the real one to pass down in his family. In addition, it was said that the Liu family of the White Mountain continent, by ditching, the head of the Yu family of the Middle Continent, and Jiang Shangzhen of the Jade Gui sect all had 1 piece of calligraphy in their collection. Kui Dong stepped in and bowed, "Your Majesty, we can start the discussion." It was the etiquette between a monarch and a minister. The young emperor immediately stood up and bowed back. It was the etiquette between a master and a disciple. Actually, there was no need for this. However, Song he was no exception. Even in front of all the important officials in the small court meeting, he was still the same. Not long after Kui Dong took his seat, the Minister of Rites and the Assistant Minister bowed before taking their seats. Then, it was the people of the Aquarius continent. The sect master of the Divine Bulletin sect, the Daoist Immortal, Great Heavenly Lord Qi Zhen. The chief consecrator of the Dali sect, the sect master of the Dragon Spring Sword sect, Wan Cheng. The patriarch of the Wind Snow Temple, a person who had attained the Tao with the appearance of a child. The last time he appeared was during the 3 matches in the Wind Thunder Garden and Zhengyang Mountain. Marshal Mountain, a man with a sword on his back who had just been promoted to the Patriarch Hall's head of justice. In the eyes of outsiders, Marshal Mountain only needed 1 Ma Kuxuan to have a future. In fact, the Wind Snow Temple was not bad. It had an immortal platform, Wei Jin. The only flaw was that Wei Jin did not care much about the Wind Snow Temple. Because of his master, he had always been distant and cold to the Wind Snow Temple. Now, he had even gone to the Great Wall of Sword Qi. Otherwise, Sword Immortal Wei Jin would have a seat today. The chief consecrator of the True Realm sect, Liu Laocheng, who cultivated in the wilderness. A gentleman of the Lakeview Academy. The mountain master of the Forest Deer Academy. The Old Dragon City's mayor, Fu Li. The Great Sui Kingdom's dynasty, the patriarch of the Gao family of Guiyang. The Aquarius continent's new 5 mountains monarchs. However, only 4 of them came today. Among them were Wei Pai of the northern mountains and Jin Qing of the middle mountains. Only Fan Junmaro of the southern mountains did not appear. The master of the Mo family. The wanderer of the Mo family behind him, Shu Ruo. The patriarch of the Yunlin Jiang family. The 2 righteous gods of the Aquarius continent. It was rumored that the water of the 6 rivers and 12 rivers would be gathered and merged into the sea. It would be a great blasphemy. It seemed that this shocking rumor was not just empty talk. The patriarch of the Shu family of Qingfeng City, after obtaining the Swansea armor, was like a tiger that had grown wings. A young woman of Xingyang Mountain, it was said that she was an old patriarch who had just started managing the flow of money. Compared to the sword cultivator patriarchs of Xingyang Mountain, she could be said to be unknown. She was sitting at the back today. Compared to the leaders of the old Dali territory, her position was even further back. Normally, Xingyang Mountain and the Shu family of Qingfeng City were close allies. However, the patriarch of the Shu family was waiting for an audience elsewhere. When he saw the female cultivator of Xingyang Mountain beside him, he only nodded in greeting and did not bother to exchange pleasantries. Instead, she took the initiative to stand up and bow before sitting down. A total of 36 cultivators and gods of the mountains and rivers had gathered together earlier. Most of them were talking to each other. For example, the Jiang family and the Fu family of Old Dragon City were in-laws. While the Shu family of Qingfeng City and the Yuan family of Shongpilla Nation were in-laws, they had some relationship with the right assistant minister of the Ministry of Rights. The Minister of Rights even sat beside Wan Fei and chatted cordially. Wei Pai and Jin Qing, the two mountain monarchs, were at loggerheads with each other. The other two mountain monarchs seemed to have a good relationship and were talking about serious matters. Qi Zhan and the great son of the Mo family chatted happily. Even the patriarch of the Gao family of Guiyang City, who had lived in seclusion for many years in the Cloud Forest Deer Academy, and the great gentleman of Lakeview Academy, could talk about academic matters. It was a pity that this female cultivator of the Zhengyang Mountain did not have anyone to talk to. Kui Dong stood up and went straight to the point. Today, I've gathered all of you to discuss 10 matters. The inside and outside of the house were two different worlds. Everyone held their breaths and focused their minds, not letting their minds wander. Other than the discussion in the Imperial study room that concerned everyone, Dali Imperial Tutor's cloud-shrouded cultivation realm was also very important. As for the three elders of the Ministry of Rights, they were like students listening to their teacher's teachings. Kui Dong said, "The first matter is that the Imperial Court is about to announce that the Crown Prince of the Five Mountains will assist the mountain monarchs." The four mountain monarchs naturally listened carefully to this matter. It involved the foundation of the Great Tao. In reality, this matter was not only about the five mountains, it also involved the vital interests of everyone present. The Minister of Rights stood up, opened a booklet, and began to sign up. After the Minister of Rights finished reading the last word, he looked at Kui Dong. Kui Dong, who had been standing all this while, nodded slightly. Only then did the old minister take his seat. Kui Dong said, "The second matter is to choose a few mountain monarchs that everyone supports." The head of the Shu family of Qingfeng City straightened his back and sat upright. The female cultivator of the Zhengyang Mountain also hurriedly restrained herself. The woman seemed to be especially afraid to look at the saint of the Dragon Spring Sword sect, Wan Cheng. Even when she was waiting for the emperor's summons, the female cultivator did not even look at Wan Cheng. The reason was very simple. If the Zhengyang Mountain wanted to become an immortal sect, they had to take in the sword Dao fate of the entire Zhuing dynasty. They had to open an immortal sect residence there to recruit and plunder all the sword Dao embryos. In the end, the four mountain monarchs, including the Shu family of Qingfeng City and the Zhengyang Mountain, had a chance to become a sect. In the future, the Dali Imperial Court would naturally pour in financial and material resources. The third matter was to discuss the matter of digging the Great Blasphemy Canal into the sea. Also, they had to nominate various immortal masters to be in charge of assisting this matter. The two righteous gods of the Great River, who were now of the same rank as Chefu Jiang and Yang Hua, could not hide their excitement. Although today's meeting did not decide who would be the Great Blasphemy Water God, it was a great honor to be invited to participate in today's meeting. Apart from that, the Dali Imperial Court chose 3 people. The civil official Liu Qingfeng, the military general Guan Yiran, and Liu Xuanmei. The other assisting candidates were all cultivators from the mountains near the future Great Blasphemy Canal. Each of them had their own suggestions. As for the patriarch of the Jiang family of Yunlin, he felt that this trip was not in vain. Because the Great Blasphemy Canal was very close to the Jiang family of Yunlin, He also suggested a disciple of the Jiang family, Jiang Yun, to participate. The reverend of the True Realm sect, Liu Laocheng, smiled knowingly. The fourth matter was to make a selection of the mountains and temples in the various regions and promote them to orthodox temples. The imperial court issued a corresponding imperial edict. The cultivators of the various mountains were to help add incense. If they were classified as obscene temples, they were to be immediately banned and destroyed. The various mountains were responsible for suppressing them. The two assistant ministers of the Ministry of Rites read the contents of their booklets one after another. The fifth matter was to move the imitation of the Beko Keikyang building in Dallas capital to the Zhongyue region of the old Zhuang dynasty. The master of Moism stood up and concisely said some things to take note of. Anyone below the 13th level could be killed. The person in charge of guarding the Beko Keikyang building was an old acquaintance of the Zhongyue mountain lord Jin Qing, the ranger of Moism, Shu Ruo. The sixth matter was to discuss the matter of all immortal forces in the Aquarius continent having to pay taxes to the Dali imperial court according to the law. The imperial study fell into silence. Kui Dong spoke, "This matter is complicated. If we want to take care of all aspects, it will not be settled in a day or two. Today, all you need to say is whether you agree or not. If you agree, there will be people to grind the details. If you don't agree, put it aside for the time being. The Dali Imperial Court will not deliberately target anyone in the near future. Regardless of whether you agree or not, when you leave this place, you will receive a booklet with detailed instructions. There will be some differences between different mountains, but there will not be too big of a difference. Now, there is no need to rush to express your opinions. Today, I am just informing all of you that there will be a buffer period of at most 1 year. The seventh matter was about the Dali dynasty borrowing money from the various mountains and how to repay the debt. Then there were the various mountains. Cultivators needed to go down the mountains to gain experience and appease the elders and descendants of the old kings of the various collapsed dynasties and vassal states. They were invited to temporarily stay in the capital of the Great Li dynasty for a period of time. If they liked the environment here, they could stay for a long time. The eighth matter was to discuss the revival of Buddhism in the Aquarius continent and the construction of temples. A certain senior monk would be the main official. Hearing this, the heavenly Lord Qizhen frowned. The ninth matter was that the Great Sui Kingdom's Cliff Academy had to return to the 72 Confucian schools. If possible, Linlu Academy had to fight for it. The Gao ancestor of Guiyang was pleased. One matter after another, under the leadership of Kui Dong, was pushed forward quickly. The young Emperor Song he just sat behind the desk. He was not angry at all about the imperial tutors overstepping his boundaries. Instead, he was in high spirits. Quisha said, the previous 9 matters were all for the 10th matter. This last matter is also related to the lives of everyone present here, including His Majesty the Emperor. Kui Dong waved his sleeves and the mountains and rivers of the continent appeared in front of everyone's eyes. All the important mountains and sects were lit up like lanterns on a scroll. Kui Dong said, "We need to talk about how the Aquarius continent should set up a defense line after the Great Wall of Sword Qi is broken and the entire Tongye continent collapses, to stop the demon race army from going up north." The 5 mountains of a continent ruled over the mountains. The central region was desecrated and gathered the water fate of a continent. Lakeview Academy, Cliff Academy, and Linlu Academy were the locations of a continent's cultural heritage. The Divine Grandeur Sect, Dragon Spring Sword Sect, Wind Snow Temple, True Martial Mountain, Old Dragon City, Jiang Clan of Cloud Forest, Book Lake True Realm Sect, Zhengyang Mountain, and Shu Clan of Clearwind City were all important defensive areas of a continent. Together with the various vassal forces and the scattered mountains, they were all chess pieces that could not be moved. Kui Dong said, just the defensive areas along the coast, such as Old Dragon City and Jiang Clan of Cloud Forest, are definitely not enough. They also need enough strategic depth. They also need to cooperate with each other. Using a point as a line to reach the surface is still not enough. It's too inflexible. We also need a large number of attacking sword boats and even more mountain ferries. We need to spend a lot of money on them. There are many other plans that have nothing to do with you. It's useless to say more. You will know in the future. In a Dali capital imperial study, it was dead silent. Kui Dong pointed to the map of the Aquarius continent, further to the south, and to the west. One was the Tongyi continent, and the other should be the Central Plains divine continent. Kui Dong's expression was cold. The vast world actually needs the smallest Aquarius continent to stop the spirit demon army. Isn't that a joke? I want to make the 7 continents of the vast world laugh themselves to death. Finally, Quisha spoke out. The huge Tongyi continent is unable to stop the spirit demon clan army, and is destined to be destroyed in the blink of an eye. Then leave it to our small Aquarius continent to complete the task. Everyone, the situation is about to change. Those who are willing to stop it, please stand up. The young emperor was the first to stand up. Everyone in the room stood up. Just then, a person who did not look like a cultivator walked into the imperial study, and smiled. My surname is Fan, and of course I am not from the Fan family in Old Dragon City. I am from the Central Plains divine continent, and am slightly wealthy. I am willing to use my immortal money to support the Aquarius continent. In the corridor outside the imperial study, there was an old eunuch dressed in red robes, with a strange expression. He looked at the white-robed young man who was squatting on the floor and leaning against the wall. The white-robed young man raged. This old man has been running around for so long, working myself to death, to trick old man Fan here. I have been standing here for half a day, and you don't even allow me to rest. Did I ***king P or shit here? Why do you care if I am standing or squatting? If you look at me again, I will give you a monkey-picking peach. Do you believe me? Are you afraid? With the isolation of heaven and earth, no one could hear the conversation outside, but inside the room, Kui Dong still shouted, Kui Dong Shan. The white-robed young man with a mole on his forehead swayed his sleeves. He did not walk into the imperial study, but just walked away, leaving behind a sentence. I have good news. The Great Wall of Sword Chi can last for 2 to 3 years longer than expected. Kui Dong Shan went to the imitation Baek Okakyung building, and went up alone. On the rooftop, Kui Dong Shan looked through the window, and looked at the sky outside, reminiscing about the time when he was young and locked up in the loft to study. Who would have thought that he would still be a young man with white hair? F***K the youth who does not know the taste of worry, F***K the old crane's cry, all noise is useless. Young but not showing off, since ancient times, it has been sad. One continent was like that, several continents were like that, the world on the mountain was like that. Kui Dong Shan slapped his face. In such a situation, cry for me. He rubbed his face, opened his mouth wide, and whimpered, I am fierce. After leaving Dallas capital city, on the official road, pedestrians looked sideways. A thin and weak poor child was carrying a white-robed young man on his back. The child was staggering. The young man was very happy. 6:41. When Pei Qian arrived at Red Candle Town, he found it strange that Xiaomi did not show up. She only cared about eating melon seeds on the mountain. Did she lose her conscience? When he arrived at Luopa Mountain, he had to take Ju Mili to the ancestral hall for punishment. After the punishment, he would help Nuan Shu sweep the courtyard. However, Pei Qian soon realized that something was wrong. In the distance, there was a commotion in the streets and alleys. Pei Qian's ears were sharp and he rushed over. When he heard it, he tightened his grip on his walking stick. He was still stubborn and did not immediately set off. After listening for a while, he tiptoed and leaped onto the roof. He looked around and finally, he followed the approximate route described by the passers-by. He leaped over the roof and disappeared in the blink of an eye. At the edge of Red Candle Town, there was a crescent-shaped bend in the river. There was an exquisite pleasure boat floating on it. Some poor boat girls lived there. Pei Qian stepped on the pleasure boat about 4 or 5 times. Every time, the pleasure boat fell a little and suddenly rose. The boat did not shake too much. Pei Qian passed the bend and continued forward. He saw a little girl in black. She left the water and walked up the mountain alone. Along the way, she did not care if she would attract the attention of some cultivators or the mountain spirit or water monster. He had to see Xiaomi first to be at ease. A heartless little girl in black was walking leisurely in the forest, humming a tune. Pei Qian landed gently on a tree branch and did not show up immediately. He looked around and frowned. He pretended not to notice and roughly weighed it. It should not be a big problem. After all, the little monster hiding 800 feet away had a cultivation base far inferior to that kind water god. Pei Qian was originally anxious and annoyed. In the end, he saw Xiaomi strolling around and casually grabbing a bunch of emerald green leaves to stuff into her mouth. Before chewing on the leaves, she looked around and made sure there was no one around. Then, she took a big bite. Pei Qian was not anxious anymore, but he was even more annoyed. According to the previous discussions, it was not a small matter. According to the passers-by, Xiaomi wandered around the area of Red Candle Town for a long time. Then, she was lying by a river and doing something. She was seen by the Jade Liquid River Water God's Water Mansion's patrolling spiritual monster. He thought that she was a little water spirit that was not on the list and wanted to recruit her to work at the Jade Liquid River. Zhu Mili did not agree. After a while, there was a conflict. The Water God's Water Mansion seemed to talk about the laws of Dali mountains and rivers, which scared Xiaomi. In any case, she was beaten in the end. Pei Qian knew more about the reason. According to Shanjun Wei Pai, Xiaomi was born in the Mute Lake of the North Continent. Her roots belonged to the identity of a water spirit from another continent, which was slightly different from the water in the Dali Three Rivers. Fortunately, now that she had obtained the identity of a consecrator of Luorpa Mountain, the influence was almost negligible. When in Rome, do as the Romans do. Therefore, Pei Qian would take Xiaomi away from Luorpa Mountain when he had nothing to do and come to the Chiduan Mountain of Red Candle Town to play. However, he did not go too close to the Three Rivers. He always felt that it would be fine if Xiaomi came to the Chongdan, Xiuhua, and Yuya rivers alone in the future. Pei Qian shook the small bamboo box on his back, sighed, and called Zhu Mili. The little girl in black turned her head and saw Pei Qian floating on the ground. She smiled from ear to ear, scratched her cheek, and then turned her body slightly, trying to face Pei Qian with the cheek that was not red and swollen. With Pei Qian's eyesight, he immediately saw the bruise on the other side of Zhu Mili's cheek. Well, she walked so slowly back home and chewed leaves. Was it because she did not want to reveal that she was beaten here? Pei Qian did not say anything. Zhu Mili blinked her eyes. The little girl clenched one hand and began to scratch her head with the other. The little girl did not dare to frown her thin and slightly yellow eyebrows, as if she was afraid that Pei Qian would feel that she was really wronged. When they were traveling in the North Continent, that person once said that every little worry when they were young was a small grain of rice. When they were old, they would think about it and have a big bowl of rice. Pei Qian asked, "What's the matter?" Zhu Mili thought for a moment. "I was playful, so I went to the river and stuck my head in the water to see if there were any fish or prawns. I didn't dare to eat them to satisfy my cravings. Then I met a big official in the Jade Juice River God Mansion. I explained for a long time before he believed that I lived in a small town in Huaihuang County. I didn't say Luorpa Mountain or Mud Bottle Alley. I just made up the names of other alleys and raised some chickens and ducks. I was very clear, so the big official believed me and let me go home." Pei Qian said angrily, "Zhu Mili, why didn't you tell him my master's name when you were bullied like this? Your home is Luorpa Mountain, and you are the right guardian of Luorpa Mountain." The little girl in black said timidly, "I was afraid of causing trouble for him. It's not a big deal, just a small grain of rice." Now that Pei Qian was a little taller, she felt that she was a little shorter. Zhu Mili spread out her hand. It was the only handful of melon seeds left. She had brought a big bag of them before, so this was all that was left. The little girl said softly, "Pei Qian, let's go home. We can eat melon seeds while traveling." Pei Qian glared at her. Zhu Mili frowned. This time, she was really going to cry. Pei Qian had been away from his hometown for so long, and now that he was finally back, he scolded her as soon as they met. This made the little girl feel really wronged. She had wandered around Chiduan Mountain and Red Candle Town so many times just to wait for Pei Qian to come home, so that he could see her first and eat melon seeds. Pei Qian rubbed little Mili's head and said softly, Don't cry, don't cry. Then, Pei Qian asked Zhu Mili to tell him in detail what had happened. The little girl in black, who didn't remember anything at all, finally understood it with great difficulty. Then, Pei Qian said, Zhu Mili, listen to me. Zhu Mili immediately puffed out her chest and stood on tiptoe. Pei Qian waved his hand, go home first. Run faster. Don't dawdle and don't wander around. When you go home, see old chef. If Wei Shanjun is on our mountain, tell him in private that I'm going to buy some things in Red Candle Town before going home. It's the end of the year, so I have to prepare some things. If I go back late, it means that I have too many things. Zhu Mili squatted down, I'm not stupid. I won't listen to you today. If you want to go back, we'll go back together. Pei Qian said, on Luopo Mountain, who's the highest official? Who recommended you to be the right guardian? Zhu Mili. The little girl in black squatted on the ground and pretended to be stupid. She stretched out her fingers and fiddled with the soil and dead leaves. Pei Qian squatted down and asked, I have Master's Dharma vision. What's there to be afraid of? Zhu Mili raised her head, what? Pei Qian took out the golden thread from his sleeve, do you see it? Zhu Mili opened her mouth wide, then covered it with both hands and said vaguely, it looks powerful and valuable. Pei Qian stood up, go back to Luopo Mountain quickly and tell old chef something. This is called passing on military information. It's a very heavy duty. Can you do it? Can you take on this responsibility? Zhu Mili immediately stood up and said loudly, Right Guardian receives the order, go now. Pei Qian put away the golden sword intent, and then took out his beloved talisman from his sleeve, which he had kept for many years, and patted it on Zhu Mili's forehead. When the talisman is in front, demons and devils should avoid it. Go. Zhu Mili ran away, but before she left, she didn't forget to spread out her hands. Pei Qian laughed angrily, knock it on the way. Pei Qian turned around, clenched the mountain walking staff tightly, took a deep breath, and went straight to the water god mansion in the distance. In Jianghu, one had to be righteous. As the god of mountains and rivers, he should protect the water and soil. What kind of ability was bullying a little Mili? The water god temple was on the other side of the river. After Pei Qian ran down the mountain, he leaped up and punched the river water. His falling body rose a few centimeters, and in the end, he crossed the vast river in one step. A young man in black who opened a bookstore in Red Candle Town was sitting on the roof. When the young shopkeeper saw this scene, he smiled and said, it's fun. He was now the righteous god of the Chongdan River, and could be considered colleagues with the Embroidery River and the Jade Liquid River. The water of the three rivers was different. The Embroidery River had a wide surface and the softest water. The Chongdan River's water flow was rapid, so the water was the strongest. The Jade Liquid River was the shortest, and the water was unpredictable. The spiritual energy of the Jade Liquid River was the most abundant. The water god was famous for being good at handling people, and she had a good relationship with all parties. The water god temple was full of incense. Without waiting for Pei Qian to enter and reason. Then, an old woman walked out of the ancestral temple, together with a middle-aged man with a smile on his face, who had cast a clumsy camouflage spell. The old woman had just received the news that a capable spirit in charge of tracking the little girl had hurriedly entered the water and returned, informing her of an extremely bad news. That black-clothed little girl was actually a spirit from Luopa Mountain. She seemed to be a protector. The old woman didn't take it seriously. Protector. Not to mention that Luopa Mountain that no one dared to investigate, even in her own water god temple. Wouldn't the protector be at least a Jindan stage? Then how could Luopa Mountain, which could be protected by Lord Wei Shan, have a low realm? In the old Li Zhu Grotto heaven, Luopa Mountain was a strange existence shrouded in clouds and mist. The young mountain master, Chen Pingan, was said to be a poor orphan in the Mud Bottle Alley in his early years, but his luck was too good. He first met the beloved daughter of Saint Ruan Jiao, and then met Wei Pai, who was only the lord of the land of Chiduan Mountain at the time of disaster. He met these two great benefactors, which led to the frightening scene of sitting on more than 10 feng shui treasured lands. But that little girl had the identity of Luorpa Mountain, which was probably not fake. Outsiders only vaguely knew that Luorpa Mountain seemed to not care much about the spirit, martial arts, and the realm of cultivators. With Lord Wei Shan protecting Luorpa Mountain, who dared to go and investigate? There were only 5 mountain lords in a continent, and Wei Pai was now the only upper 5 realm god in the Aquarius continent. He was a family member that even His Majesty the Emperor was very close to. Not only was the Song clan's land of prosperity, even the entire territory of the Old Dali was considered the territory of the Northern Mountains. The male water god temple official cupped his fists and said, "I misunderstood that little girl previously, mistakenly thinking that she was a spirit that broke into the market. I thought that it was my duty, so I questioned her, and then there was a dispute. I was indeed rude. I am willing to apologize to Luorpa Mountain." The old woman also smiled and said, "Just an apology is not enough. Later on, our Jade Liquid River Water God Temple will also express our gratitude. This old woman will personally come with gifts." Pei Qian clenched the mountain walking stick in her hand, not saying a word. What to do? She kept feeling that something was wrong. But she couldn't think of what was wrong. If only Master was by her side. Even if Master wasn't, little Senior was. The old woman smiled calmly. The corners of the man's mouth secretly twitched. After being punished, he would definitely have to pay out of his own pocket to buy gifts. However, this little girl in front of him had come to question him. Did she really think that the face of the Jade Liquid River Water God Temple was so worthless? What the Water God Temple was afraid of was that young mountain master who had extremely good luck, as well as Ron Xiu and Wei Pai behind the young man. Why would such a funny little martial artist in front of him want to rely on his fists and a mountain walking stick to smash our temple? It's good that he smashed it. I'll let you smash the door first. When the time comes, it'll be hard to say who will apologize. Pei Qian's eyes were sharp and she saw it. She was so angry that she could only take a deep breath. The mountain walking stick in her hand trembled slightly, and some imperceptible ripples appeared in one of her sleeves. As it was not the kind of spiritual energy that Qi refinement warriors use to circulate their divine abilities and spells, even the old woman with the highest cultivation level in the temple did not notice it. Compensate your mother's gift and apologize to your mother. A green figure with an imposing aura landed outside the Water God Temple and stood beside Pei Qian. It was Chen Lingjun, who had completely refined a Dragon King basket. Without saying a word, Chen Lingjun reached out and lifted the Dragon King basket that was personally repaired by perfected Fire Dragon of the North Continent. The Dragon King basket suddenly became as big as a mountain and enveloped the entire Water God Temple. In the world, the Dragon King basket could even capture flood dragons wantonly. The old woman in front of Chen Lingjun and the Water God Temple official were originally water immortals and water spirits. The old woman could still withstand the innate pressure and her body did not sway. However, the man's knees immediately went soft and he knelt on the ground. It was only because the old woman reached out and grabbed his shoulder that he did not lose his face. Chen Lingjun said, "You want to apologize, right? I'll learn from you. I'll beat you up first and then apologize to you." The old woman smiled and said, "It's naturally wrong to hit a little girl. It's just that there's a mistake. What's wrong with apologizing? Immortal Master, are you trying to use your power to bully others? Are you trying to use this immortal Dharma treasure to suppress the Water God Temple today?" Chen Lingjuan's expression was gloomy as he nodded and said, "Yes, after I'm done with this dilapidated Water God Temple, I'll go to the North Continent directly. My master won't be able to scold me even if he wants to." Pei Qian suddenly said, "Chen Lingjun, I'm used to being scolded by master. Let me do it." Chen Lingjun was stunned. How could his master bear to scold this little girl? Chen Lingjun smiled and said, "Pei Qian, your current realm." Before Chen Lingjun could finish, Pei Qian slammed the mountain traveling staff in his hand heavily on the ground. The golden threads in his sleeve that even Pei Qian could not suppress instantly spread out like a waterfall. The threads wrapped around the mountain traveling staff. It was like a golden sword. It was supported by Pei Qian's sword. In an instant, the world was filled with sword intent. Even Chen Lingjun, who had an abnormally tough physique, could not help but take a few steps back. The female sword immortal Zhu Cheng's lineage, the great sword immortal, had once said that he was unhappy and should attack. The old woman was flustered and could no longer maintain her previous calmness. She felt that it was a small matter. The little girl in front of her with a bamboo box on her back was clearly a sword cultivator. It was even very likely that she was the legendary sword immortal embryo. The old woman in the temple could no longer care about the ordinary official in the water residence. She hurriedly activated the water immortal's innate divine ability and used the ripples in her heart to inform the water god in the great river water residence. However, there was no response. This was because above the river surface above the water residence, there was a hunchbacked old man who had traveled far away on the wind. He hovered in the air with his hands behind his back and looked down into the water. He smiled and said, "You will die." Pei Qian lifted the mountain traveling staff that was surrounded by golden sword intents, his eyes shining brightly. She said, "I remember what Master said. An apology is of the utmost importance, not the amount of compensation. This matter is wrong, and the order is wrong. What is sincerity? You don't have to apologize to Luopa Mountain, but to Zhu Mili." The water god of Chongdan River retracted his palm with a helpless expression. He couldn't just let the Jade Liquid River Water Temple continue to court death like this. He hurriedly rode the wind and rushed over. After seeing too much commotion, it was easy to get into trouble by just being happy. Sooner or later, he would be laughed at by others. He didn't expect that just as he approached the water residence, the old man laughed and said, "Taking sides and speaking crooked logic will also die." The black-clothed water god could only descend and sit on the surface of the Jade Liquid River. A graceful woman in palace attire floated to the surface and sneered, "Luopa Mountain is using force to provoke the Jade Liquid River. I will definitely have Dallas Ministry of Rights report you." Zhu Lian took out a Dali Peace medallion, which was still a first-class medallion. He placed it at his waist and nodded with a smile, "All right. I'll give you this chance. Otherwise, your Chong Danjiang colleagues will think that your auntie is bluffing." When the water god saw the genuine first-class medallion, her expression changed drastically. She was hesitating and was about to grit her teeth and lower her head before making a decision. She didn't expect a fist to arrive. She was directly sent to the depths of the Jade Liquid River. Not to mention the trembling of the golden body, the golden blood of the water god flowed out of her 7 orifices. As for the short and thin old man, his majestic fist intent exploded. It was like an immortal's ability to repel water, landing directly not far from the bottom of the water. The old man chuckled and said, "Luopa Mountain's manager, Zhu Lian, asked about the Jade Liquid River Water Temple today. Sorry for offending you." The old man took a step back and lightly stepped forward. His stooped body bent even more as he slowly said, "When I punch, only life and death are determined. There is no reason." On the river surface far away from the underwater battlefield, the water god of Chongdan River frowned with a grave expression. The martial arts master underwater was not as simple as a far-travel realm. The old man's fist intent was so powerful that it suddenly suppressed the water of the Jade Liquid River. It was actually an unimaginable suppression. After the punch, the river water shattered. The old man reached out and grabbed the neck of a woman in a palace dress. The latter's body flowed with golden blood as she fell into the surging river water. The old man glanced at the water god of Chongdan River. The latter stood up and cupped his fists. "Senior, just go to the Jade Liquid River Water Temple." The old man smiled and said, "It's not the first time I've bought books with Lord Water God. Even Luopa Mountain remembers it. I was just bluffing earlier. Lord Water God, don't bear a grudge." The water god of Chongdan River smiled bitterly and nodded. On the side of the ancestral temple, the temple attendant saw the scene from afar. The old man swam over with the wind and dragged the severely injured water god in his hand. The old woman was frightened out of her wits. She hurriedly circulated her meager divine ability and spell to cast a camouflage. She also immediately closed the door of the ancestral temple to prevent the kind men and women inside from seeing this scene. Previously, the water god ancestral temple had long been noisy. After all, Anyone who was not blind could see the Dragon King basket floating in the air. The old woman deliberately did not close the door. She only stopped the devotees from leaving and deliberately let them gather at the door to watch the show. After Zhu Lian landed, he casually threw the water god beside the old woman's feet. He walked between Pei Qian and Chen Lingjun and stretched out his hands to press down on their heads. He smiled and said, "Very good." Pei Qian slapped old chef's hand away. Chen Lingjun put away the Dragon King basket that covered the sky. Zhu Lian walked forward and stepped on the head of the dying water god. He looked at the door and smiled at the old woman in the temple. "You old woman, you're ugly and evil. Why don't you continue to drag the common people to help you share the danger? Do you still want to ruin the reputation of our Luopa mountain? It's useless." Zhu Lian increased the strength of his foot and stomped half of the water god's head into the ground. "All right, that's it. Remember to apologize. It doesn't matter if you don't come. You'll save the money for a few bowls of tea. However, you'll definitely get the immortal money of the Jade Liquid River Manor. Our Luopa mountain is a small mountain. We're so poor that we can't even afford to eat." Zhu Lian turned his head and asked, "Do you want to feel more comfortable or do you want to leave a way out so that we can meet again in the future?" Pei Qian shook his mountain staff and asked in confusion, "What do you mean?" Zhu Lian smiled and said, "You'll know when your sister Shoushou returns." Pei Qian acknowledged, "Then I'll apologize and be done with it." Zhu Lian lowered his head and looked at the water god who was still willing to pretend to be dead even though she was about to die. He transmitted his voice and said with a smile, "You're really lucky to have met our Luopa mountain. You should be secretly happy. Otherwise, forget about this ancestral temple, there might not even be a jade liquid river in the future. I've already imparted the life-saving method to you. Go figure it out yourself." In the end, Zhu Lian left with Pei Qian and Chen Lingjun. They walked along the river leisurely. Zhu Lian rubbed his wrist and sighed, "In the end, it's not happy enough. If they were all gods of mountains and rivers with such natures, Ingot's path would be right. Fortunately, it's not all like that." Pei Qian grumbled, "Fighting and killing, what a scandal. Old chef, what did that silly Ingot say? She's quite tall, but why is her brain always so muddled?" Zhu Lian smiled and said, "Let's talk when we get home." Pei Qian smashed his staff on the head of the unhappy Chen Lingjun. Even if it was just a little bit of sword intent left, Chen Lingjun almost fell to the ground and twitched. Chen Lingjun swayed for a long time. In the end, he hugged his head and shouted, "Pei Qian, ma 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 ma." Pei Qian was also stunned for a moment. He hurriedly apologized and said that the mountain staff was strange today. Seeing that Chen Lingjun was not angry, he was generous. Pei Qian laughed and said, "Chen Lingjun, you're so straightforward today. In my little account book, I've crossed out the 72 accounts of you snatching melon seeds, all of them, 72 entries, just for the matter of eating melon seeds." Chen Lingjun grimaced. After being hit by the staff, he actually smiled. "Thank you." Pei Qian jumped up and said, "I'm going to find millet to eat melon seeds." Zhu Lian said, "Pei Qian, don't forget." Pei Qian played with his crazy sword technique, occasionally scaring Chen Lingjun. "Got it, I'll remind Chen Lingjun." Chen Lingjun said, "Old chef, I plan to go to the North Continent." Zhu Lian nodded. "Go early and come back early." Ruan Ting returned to the Dragon Spring Sword sect from the capital of Dali. He was still devoted to the matter of sword forging. Everyone had signed a mountain oath regarding the discussion in the imperial study. Whoever leaked it would suffer the backlash of the oath. When the Dali imperial court found out, the 9 generations of that person would be executed. Ruan Ting didn't care about this. He and the Dali imperial court were allies. Ruan Ting still didn't care about the affairs of the Dragon Spring Sword sect. The specific matters of the sect were handled by the direct disciples like Dong Jiyu and Xu Xiaoqiao. He had also gradually handed over his relationships with the Dali imperial court and the other mountains. After his daughter, Ruan Xiu, cultivated on Dragon Spine Mountain for a few years, she quietly left the mountain and went to the new territory of the Dragon Spring Sword sect. Fortunately, they didn't fight in the end. Instead, They reached an amicable agreement with the old Zhongyue mountain deity. This made Ruan Ting feel relieved. They had a territory, but no one took care of it. This was the most awkward thing about the Dragon Spring Sword sect. For a sect with the word sect in its name, the direct disciples of the ancestral hall of the Dragon Spring Sword sect were too few. Even though they had taken in 3 batches of disciples, because there weren't many people in each batch, it still seemed to be declining. Therefore, when the Song clan handed over the territory of the old Zhuang dynasty to Zhengyang Mountain, Ruan Ting didn't feel that there was anything to complain about. He wasn't capable enough and couldn't hold on to the fat meat. If it landed in someone else's bowl, then he could only eat the pickles in his bowl. Moreover, Dali had previously given a large piece of land to the Dragon Spring Sword sect in the old Zhongyue territory, which could be considered as laying the foundation. Being close to the capital was a gesture of the young emperor, so as to prevent the imperial court officials from thinking too much and mistakenly thinking that the Dragon Spring Sword sect had already moved to the side, and that Zhengyang Mountain would be the future #1 sword sect in the Aquarius continent. Of course, the Song clan would also be less suspicious of burning the bridge after crossing it. The Dali imperial court, from the previous emperor to the current emperor, from Ruan Qiong's reign in the Pearl Grotto Heaven until now, had been extremely kind to Ruan Ting in all aspects. The main reason was that Ruan Ting himself didn't want to take in disciples indiscriminately. If one's temperament wasn't up to standard, even if one was an innate sword embryo, there would naturally be other places to take him in. It didn't matter if he went to Zhengyang Mountain, which had the potential to become the next sword sect. Of the previous 12 in-name disciples, half of them had left, including the innate sword embryo. Now, he had gone to Zhengyang Mountain and was already a direct disciple of the ancestral hall there. It was said that he was even taken in as a last disciple by the ancestral master of a certain mountain. Of course, Ruan Ting's good relations with people really opened the eyes of the young emperor, Song He. Before the discussion in the imperial study, the divine grandeur sect's Qi Zhen, the ancestral master of the Wind Snow Temple, the sword cultivator of the Martial Mountain, Liu Laocheng of the True Realm sect, the 4 mountain lords including Wei Pai and Jin Qing, as well as the master of the Shu clan of Qingfeng City, all got along well with Ruan Ting. They even took the initiative to chat with him, or at least take the initiative to greet him and give him sufficient courtesy. He was the only one. It was true that Ruan Ting was not good with words, but it was difficult to hide the character of a certain cultivator on the mountain for a long time. Those who knew Ruan Ting couldn't find any fault with him, and most of them were willing to be friends with him. Those who didn't know him, as long as they mentioned Ruan Ting, whether it was the former Ruan Ting of the Wind Snow Temple or the current sect master Ruan, would be willing to say a good word for the #1 swordsmith of the Aquarius continent. It was rare for Ruan Ting to show up today, and he called all the first-generation disciples to the table for dinner. He was the first disciple of the Dragon Spring Sword sect's ancestral master hall, Dong Jiyu. After reaching the gold core stage in his early years, he had already started his peak. But the most embarrassing thing about Dong Jiyu was that he wasn't a sword cultivator, and his background was even more difficult to talk about. At present, there was already some gossip in the imperial court of Great Li, as well as some immortal mountains. Xu Xiaoqiao was originally a sword cultivator of the Wind Snow Temple. After he made a big mistake and was expelled from the sect, he found Ruan Ting and cut off the thumb of his right hand that held the sword. Only then did he become Ruan Ting's direct disciple. Xie Ling was a sword cultivator who had already nurtured a natal flying sword. Not only that, in addition to the immortal weapon given by Lu Chen, ancestor Xie Shi also gave this descendant of the Peach Leaf Alley 2 treasures. One was a sword immortal relic of the northern Luzhu called Peach Leaf, which was refined by Xie Ling as one of his natal items. The other was a very high-grade blade strengthening gourd called Full Moon. It just so happened that the 4 of them each sat on a long bench. Ruan Xiu was still in the territory of the old Middle Peak, so Ruan Ting didn't have the chance to serve anyone. Ruan Ting said, "Dong Jiyu, you told me before that you want to reach the nascent soul stage within 100 years, right?" Dong Jiyu quickly put down the bowl and chopsticks, wiped the corner of his mouth, and said seriously, "Yes, master." Ruan Ting said, "Then don't let other people's cultivation speed affect your state of mind and force yourself to reach the nascent soul stage in advance." Cultivation is all about your own skills. You are in the Dragon Spring Sword sect. So what if you are not a sword cultivator? So what if others laugh at you? Even if Xu Xiaoqiao and Xieling surpass you in the future, what can you do? Are you not the first disciple of the Dragon Spring Sword sect? Since when did the Dragon Spring Sword sect need to rely on fists to determine seniority? Did I not teach you that? Or did you not remember? Ruanting looked at Dong Jiyu and said, "Let's continue eating." Dong Jiyu immediately picked up the chopsticks. Ruanting turned around and said, "Xu Xiaoqiao, Xieling, you two go to the territory of the old middle peak in Dali after dinner. If Xiao Xiao doesn't want to come back, it's useless to persuade her. Just let her be." Xu Xiaoqiao nodded. Ruanting suddenly said, "Remember to go to the shop in the dragon riding alley and buy more pastries." Xu Xiaoqiao, who was usually indifferent, showed a rare smile. Xieling couldn't hide her joy. She could finally see Sister Xiao. The two sword cultivators of the Dragon Spring Sword sect went to the small town in Huaihuang County on their swords. When they arrived outside the shop in the dragon riding alley, Xu Xiaoqiao picked some of every kind of pastries in the shop. He had the most peach cakes, which were 2 big oiled paper packets. The shopkeeper was Sharu. Seeing Xu Xiaoqiao, especially Xieling, who was from an illustrious sect and family, Sharu couldn't help but be a little reserved. After hearing that they were buying pastries for Wan Xiu, Sharu didn't want to accept the money. After all, Sharu was very close to Miss Xiu Xiu. It was just that she hadn't seen her for many years. Xieling smiled and said, "Shopkeeper Shi, thank you. I still have to pay." Sharu didn't dare to be nosy. After all, with his current appearance, it was indeed inappropriate for him to fuss about it. Then, the two of them went to the new territory of the Dragon Spring Sword sect. Above the sea of clouds, Xieling asked with a smile, "Second senior sister, I heard that Sister Xiu Xiu has a little demon by her side." Xu Xiaoqiao nodded. Xieling didn't ask any more. In the thick snow of the mountains, the two of them walked down the mountain road. A little girl holding an oil paper umbrella flew out and rolled on the ground. Her body was covered in snow as she rolled down. The young woman behind her followed slowly. After the little girl got up, she used the oil paper umbrella in her hand as an iron hammer and muttered, "Old Lord swings the hammer," adding charcoal to the chaos. "Ayo, ayo. Master Rain and Uncle Wind are helping. God of Thunder and Mother of Lightning are helping." Crackle. The young woman said, "The sword forging formula isn't memorized like this." The little girl stopped swinging the hammer in her hand and looked up at the distant mountain. She lowered her voice and asked, "Sister Xiu, that's a mountain god. He used to be a mountain lord of our Dali dynasty. Even his fart is like thunder. It can blow a little guy like me to death. Why is he still so polite when he sees you? It doesn't look like his being polite. He's afraid of Sister Xiu." Ruan Xiu said, "You're so smart. You know the answer. Why are you still asking? Talk more and you'll get hungry easily." The little girl rolled her eyes and said, "Sister Xiu, then aren't you smarter than me?" Ruan Xiu shook her head and said, "I don't like to think. I'm a little stupid." The little girl pretended to be afraid and said, "Sister Xiu, you get hungry so easily. Won't you be starving? Just eat me." Ruan Xiu nodded and said, "I will." The little girl ran to Ruan Xiu's side. This time, she was really scared. She tugged at Ruan Xiu's sleeve and said softly, "Sister Xiu, don't eat me." Ruan Xiu didn't want to talk. The little girl held the oil paper umbrella and said, "Sister Xiu, be careful. I'll tell on you." In the end, the little girl was slapped lightly by Ruan Xiu and spun dozens of times. She fell heavily into the snow in the distance and rolled all the way, breaking countless withered trees and branches. However, the little girl quickly ran back to Ruan Xiu's side. She didn't take it seriously at all. She was probably used to it. When they got close to the foot of the mountain, the little girl quickly hid behind Ruan Xiu. Xu Xiaoqiao and Xieling floated down and sheathed their swords. The way they sheathed their swords was completely different from the way they did it. One of them was clean and neat while the other was elegant and casual. One of them respectfully called her senior sister. The other smiled and called her Sister Xiu Xiu. Ruonsho nodded and said, "You're here." The little girl peeked her head out from behind Ruonsho. She found it strange that there were two sword immortals in one go. They didn't look like a celestial couple. That young man who looked like a spoiled brat obviously liked Sister Shio. Did he call her Sister Shio just now? TSK, TSK, TSK. The little girl felt that this little sword immortal was pitiful. Shu Xiaoqiao took off the package and handed it to Ruonsho. He smiled and said, "Pastries from the shop." Ruonsho smiled and took the package. After weighing it for a while, she became even happier. The little girl cursed in her heart. Look, it's not even as good as a package of pastries to make Sister Shio happy. She really wanted to knock this young man out with a stick and drag him back to the cave to be her future husband. She would raise him first. Good looks could really be eaten. As for the so-called cave, she would be the only one left. Ruonsho carefully took out a piece of peach blossom cake and put it in her mouth. She was instantly full of smiles. Then, she picked up a piece of pastry and gave it to the little girl. The little girl swallowed it in one bite. She didn't know how it tasted. Ruonsho asked, "Did you pay?" Shu Xiaoqiao said, "Yes." Ruonsho nodded but said, "I don't need to pay to go there." Shu Xiaoqiao was speechless. Xieling's feelings were even more complicated. Shu Xiaoqiao said, "Master asked me to ask senior sister if you want to go back." Ruonsho said, "Of course, why not? I still want to listen to Xiaomi's stories. We haven't seen each other for so long. Xiaomi can make up a lot of stories again." Shu Xiaoqiao felt that Ruonsho's reason was the most reasonable. In a bookstore in a county of a vassal state of the old Zhuang dynasty, the bookseller was a young woman with ordinary looks. Her name was He Xian. She had an excellent figure. Even if her face wasn't outstanding enough, many wastrels would still hang around the bookstore. However, no one took advantage of her. At most, they would talk nonsense. The young woman didn't speak much. She turned a deaf ear to this. There were also young scholars who came from well-off families but couldn't be considered as aristocrats. They came to buy books with ulterior motives. At dusk today, He Xian sat behind the counter and was flipping through a book. She looked at the sky and was about to get up to close the bookstore and go back to her residence to rest. It wasn't far. It was only 2 alleys away. She had just put down the book when she saw a young man with a sword on his back standing outside the bookstore. Even if he didn't care about his appearance, it was still difficult to hide his handsome face. He was handsome and elegant, like a pine tree. She said softly, "Sir, I'm sorry. My shop is about to close." He stood outside the door as if he didn't dare to take a step forward. His lips trembled as he tried to calm his tone. "I was just passing by and wanted to buy some books. I didn't mean to look for you." He Xian sighed in her heart. "You don't believe such a lame excuse. How can you fool others?" However, He Xian didn't say much. She sat back in her chair and picked up the book. She said softly, "If you really want to buy books, you can choose them yourself. We can close later." The young man still didn't cross the door. He Xian just lowered her head and flipped through the book. With the help of the afterglow of the setting sun, she didn't find it difficult to do so even though her current realm wasn't worth mentioning. He plucked up his courage and said with a trembling voice, "Come with me to the Wind Thunder Garden." "What do you say, Sujia?" Even if she didn't use that little trick, even if she really changed her appearance, he would still be able to recognize her at a glance. Even if the river of time flowed backward and she suddenly turned into a little girl or a white-haired old woman, Liu Baqiao wouldn't miss her in a sea of people. However, how could he say those words? What right did he have to say them? He Xian raised her head and frowned. "Although I'm no longer a direct disciple of the ancestral Master Hall, my name is still on the register of Xingyang Mountain's outer sect. It's clear and obvious." "Sir Liu, why do you say that?" He Xian paused for a moment. "However, I'm now considered to have left the mountain to gain experience." "Sir Liu, please don't call me Sujia." Liu Baqiao only felt that his heart and intestines were twisted together. Even though he was already a sword cultivator at the bottleneck of the Aurus core realm, he still felt suffocated at this moment. He even wanted to bend down to catch his breath. Liu Baqiao asked, "What's your name now?" He Xian was annoyed. "Sir Liu, what does it have to do with you?" Liu Baqiao lowered his head and whispered, "I like you. I've been looking for you for many years." The female shopkeeper of the bookstore, He Xian, or rather, Zhengyang Mountain's Su Jiao, stood up and said, "Sir Liu, I beg you. Can you leave me some peace and quiet? I used up the last of my savings to settle down here. It wasn't easy. Sir Liu, I'm different from you. It was like that in the past and even more so now. Moreover, I've never liked you. Sir Liu, ask yourself honestly, how many times have we met and spoken to each other?" Liu Baqiao raised his head and smiled sadly. "We've never spoken to each other before. We've only spoken today." Su Jiao softened her tone. "Sir Liu, you should know that I don't like you, right?" Liu Baqiao nodded. Su Jiao didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Sir Liu likes Su Jiao because it's the genius sword cultivator Liu Baqiao of the Wind and Thunder Garden. Should Su Jiao be grateful to you? Liu Baqiao shook his head. "There's no such logic in this world. It's right that you don't like me." Su Jiao closed the book and gently placed it on the table. She said, "Sir Liu, if you feel guilty because senior brother defeated me in the sword debate, then I can sincerely tell you that there's no need for that. I don't hate your senior brother Huang He. On the contrary, when I fought him in the sword debate, I knew that Huang He was far superior to me in terms of sword mastery and cultivation base. A loss is a loss. Furthermore, if young Master Liu thinks that I've fallen to such a state after being expelled from the Ancestral Master Hall after being defeated, young Master Liu will have misunderstood me even more." Su Jiao's eyes were clear. "I've been cultivating on the mountain since I was young. I don't have any memories of the lower part of the mountain. Therefore, ever since I can remember, I've treated Xingyang Mountain as my only home." Liu Baqiao said softly, "As long as Miss Su continues to open the shop here, I'll leave. I promise I won't bother Miss Su again." Su Jiao laughed angrily. "I've already told you. I've already spent all my savings to open a bookstore and buy a small house here. Even if I want to move, where can I move to? I only hope that Sir Liu will keep your promise." Liu Baqiao nodded. "I will." In the end, Liu Baqiao still didn't step over the threshold. He only asked, "Can I sit here for a while?" Just for a while. Su Jiao was helpless. That Liu Baqiao really did sit on the threshold. When the afterglow elongated his shadow on the street, Liu Baqiao finally got up and left. He Zhixio was indeed a farmer. There were many good farmers. What was wrong with liking such a woman? Inside the bookstore, Su Jiao shook her head. She only thought that such a baffling matter should end here. The fact that Liu Baqiao liked her was actually not a secret between Zhengyang Mountain and Wind Thunder Garden. However, Su Jiao really didn't like him. Su Jiao closed the bookstore's door and walked to the small house. After that sword-seeking incident, Su Jiao lost everything. A sword peak, her status as a direct disciple of the Ancestral Hall, and the blade-strengthening gourd that her master gave her. As a result, she was now covered in mud and could only hide in the marketplace. Before this, it wasn't that there weren't any bumps. It was just that she had dealt with all those big and small troubles with great difficulty. Now, she was here. As she said, she didn't hate Xingyang Mountain. She even felt guilt that she couldn't let go of. What she couldn't let go of were some people and some words. However, Su Jiao had an indescribable fear towards Li Tuanjing's last disciple, the current owner of Wind Thunder Garden, Huang He. It often woke her up from nightmares. She couldn't understand and couldn't let go of it. Back then, Huang He was on the fairy platform of the Wind Snow Temple where the 3 sword-seeking matches were held. The man carried a sword case full of small swords, but they weren't natal flying swords. It was unimaginable that he could split his attention to control the swords. One sword pierced through Su Jiao's hand that was holding the sword. Another time, it cut the red string of the blade-strengthening gourd that was tied to her waist. Finally, 2 flying swords nailed into her wrists. After Su Jiao fainted, the last scene before she closed her eyes was Huang He stepping on the blade-strengthening gourd and gently twisting it. The mountain-like man seemed to be a powerful and invincible existence, but he was ruthless and cold-blooded. Even when she saw Liu Baqiao today, Su Jio's heart still trembled. She couldn't help but think of Huang He and that nightmare, the main culprit. Su Jio walked in the secluded alley. She reached out a hand and wrapped it around her shoulder as if she wanted to warm herself. As she walked, Su Jio's face turned pale. She leaned against the wall and raised her hand to rub the space between her eyebrows. After a long time, Su Jio raised the back of her hand to wipe the sweat on her forehead and went to the small house. Su Jio arrived at the end of the alley. After opening the door, she was stunned. Then, her face was filled with tears. The other party looked like a woman. However, just like how Liu Baqiao could recognize Su Jio at a glance, Su Jio could also recognize the woman in front of her. It was her master who brought her up the mountain for cultivation. However, for some reason, it was not recorded in the Hall of Ancestral Masters records. Su Jio had long been under the tutelage of a patriarch of Xingyang Mountain and became a direct disciple of the Hall of Ancestral Masters. As for her master, there was still no record of any disciples under her. Her master's seniority was not low. However, she was never well known in Xingyang Mountain. In the past, whenever there was a meeting in the Hall of Ancestral Masters, her master almost never showed up. The chair at the very back was always empty. Because her master liked to travel the mountain, she would often leave for decades. The woman removed the camouflage spell. She was the female cultivator from Xingyang Mountain who went to Dallas Imperial Study to participate in the meeting. She was sitting at the back of the seat and no one paid attention to her. She looked young and wasn't very beautiful. She walked to the side of the teary-eyed Su Jio and reached out her hand to touch Su Jio's head. She smiled gently and said, "Silly disciple. Master has only left Xingyang Mountain and traveled for a few years, and you've become like this. Why, without Master by your side, have you always been that little girl who doesn't even dare to walk at night? If I had known, I wouldn't have sent you to Ascension Peak back then." Su Jio smiled until her limpid eyes narrowed into crescents. It was as if with her master by her side, she could really be fearless and become that carefree little girl back then. The woman retracted her hand. There was a red string tied around her wrist. The woman stood for a moment before she got up and left. She did not say that she would bring Su Jio back to Xingyang Mountain and restore her status as a direct disciple of the Hall of Ancestral Masters. She also did not mention the future ownership of the blade strengthening gourd. However, Su Jio felt that the peaceful days were not as unbearable as she imagined. Although she had many regrets in her heart, she was at peace as she guarded that bookstore every day and earned silver and copper coins. Of course, that was apart from that nightmare. After the woman left, she became an ordinary woman in plain clothes. Not long after the woman left, there was a knock on the door. Su Jio quickly ran to open the door, mistakenly thinking that her master had returned. Then, Su Jio staggered back, her body swaying. With her sword heart destroyed, Su Jio, who had fallen to the lower 5 realms, could not even compare to that ordinary woman. The man stood outside the door with a cold expression. He said slowly, "Su Jio, you should know very well that Liu Baqiao will definitely secretly come to see you in the future. He's just hiding it from you. Now, you have 2 choices. Either you scram back to Xingyang Mountain and struggle at death's door, or you find a man to marry and obediently take care of your husband and children. If after this, Liu Baqiao still doesn't give up on you and delays his sword practice, then I'll make him give up completely." Su Jio bit her lips so hard that blood seeped out. She could not say a word. This person was the owner of the Wind Thunder Garden, Huang He, who had broken out of seclusion some time ago. If it was not for the Wind Snow Temple's sword immortal Wei Jin, Huang He would be the #1 sword genius in the Aquarius continent. After saying that, Huang He left on his sword. If Liu Baqiao was not someone his master thought highly of, Huang He would not even bother with such a boring love affair. If it was not for the fact that the Wind Thunder Garden needed another person to shoulder the burden when something happened to Huang He would not even care about Liu Baqiao. Both of them were sword cultivators, but their great dows were too different. Now that Huang He had successfully broken out of seclusion, he would have to wait for the Wind Thunder Garden of a certain patriarch sword cultivator of Xingyang Mountain. He followed Liu Baqiao all the way here. There were a few times when Huang He resisted the urge to attack. Every time, he wanted to knock Liu Baqiao unconscious and drag him back to the Wind Thunder Garden. He wanted to make this talented person cultivate in seclusion for 100 years. Su Jiao went to close the door absent-mindedly. He leaned against the door and sat on the ground, sobbing. What should I do with this haunting Huang He? Su Jiao's master, the woman, had just walked out of the county's city gate. She looked up at the sky and continued on her way. She was not going to Zhengyang Mountain, but to find the next disciple. As for the Wind Thunder Garden, it would stop here for the next few hundred years. Senior and junior brothers would become sworn enemies. Whether it was Huang He or Liu Baqiao, they would at most become the next Li Tuanjing. What was interesting was not that Su Jiao did not like Liu Baqiao and would not like him in the future. Instead, it was that Su Jiao herself did not know that she already liked Huang He. It would be better if Liu Baqiao and Huang He were both half dead. As for the woman from Zhengyang Mountain who was killed by Li Tuanjing hundreds of years ago, she was also a disciple of this woman who walked on foot. Like Su Jiao, she was an anonymous disciple. There were also some women who were not her disciples, but they were related to her. She might have done some small things that had nothing to do with her master. For example, how did Wei Jin of the Wind Snow Temple meet He Xiaoyong, whom he liked? There were also some old stories about the Zhuiying dynasty in the early years. Unknowingly, she had played with the destiny of a continent's swordsmanship for 1,000 years. She did not dare to say all of it, but she had at least half of it. Apart from that, she had been to the Tongye continent and left a prophecy in the Fuyo sect. She shook her sleeves and raised her wrist slightly. She looked down and smiled. Then, she retracted her gaze and walked forward slowly. Many of the so-called smart people on the mountain peak were also good at scheming. However, such scheming was only scheming after all. It was easy to break. Once it was broken, it would be gone. However, there was only one thread in the world. Once it was formed, it would be difficult for a sword immortal to break it. Even if it seemed to be broken, it would still be entangled for a lifetime. Unless there was a person who was good at scheming and meticulous, only then would he be able to face this deadlock and feel slightly better. Once the thread was pulled, it was not a sword immortal who attacked. In fact, no one would die. However, it would be better to die than to live. She never underestimated her enemies. Therefore, those who cared about her would have to bury more threads. The infatuated people in the world liked to be sad. They would find joy in pain. If they were not sad, how could they be considered infatuated? Her thoughts drifted away. It was a pity that she had not seen her senior apprentice brother for many years. Last time, they were very close. It could even be considered as brushing past each other. It could not be helped. As long as senior brother wanted to avoid her, she would be blind. She might not even recognize him even if he was close. She heard that the last time he appeared was near the Tongye continent's Taoist temple. There was one bad thing about senior brother. He would borrow her wrist to seduce her and did not like to return it. The woman suddenly mocked herself. Don't tell me he has already noticed. The woman shook her head and smiled. That's impossible. He's still so young. Why would he care about the small Zhengyang mountain? A sloppy young man with a hunchback went to the small town's tavern to touch the small hands. After a few teasing words, he strolled to the street where the Yang family's shop was. The young man, Shi Lingshan, who was both a shop assistant and old Yang's disciple, was sitting behind the counter. He was wading in the water to refine his soul. His mind was immersed in it and he was silent. He was half asleep. Su Dian, who was even more diligent in cultivation than junior brother Shi Lingshan, was not practicing with that strange method today. Instead, he sat at the door and basked in the sun. When he saw senior brother Zheng Dafeng walking over, Su Dian stood up. Zheng Dafeng waved his hand. Little Su, you've become more beautiful. If you continue to be so beautiful, I'll feel even more uncomfortable when I think about how I'll have to get married in the future. As he approached Su Dian, Zheng Dafeng beat his chest in pain. Su Dian asked, Senior brother, are you looking for master? Zheng Dafeng said helplessly, I'm not looking for master. It's just that it's so cold on the mountain. I can't even warm my blanket when I sleep. I'll freeze to death. I'm just going down the mountain to stretch my legs. Zheng lass, you're really too much. You're just a few steps away from senior brother, but you've never thought of visiting senior brother. Senior brother has such a big house. Isn't Su lass, who's as thin as a willow branch, living there? Su Jian shook his head. I don't dare to spend the night there. I'm afraid there will be rats running around the walls. Zheng Dafeng said seriously, Little Su, it's not that I'm nagging you because of my seniority. As someone who practices martial arts, you have to train your courage. How can you be so timid? Let's go and stay at my place tonight to train your courage. Su Jian said helplessly, Senior brother, if you have something to say, please say it. If he did not know that this senior brother of his only knew how to talk and not do anything, Su Jian would have already fallen out with him. Zheng Dafeng put his hands behind his back. He saw a small stool and wanted to sit down. It should be warmer. In the end, Su Jian picked him up with the tip of his foot. Zheng Dafeng stepped over the threshold and saw the stone spirit mountain. He shook his head and said, It's said that the pavilion closest to the water enjoys moonlight first. You brat, you can't even keep an eye on your senior sister. Just you wait. You'll be sad in the future. Which Jianghu novel doesn't write about a senior sister or junior sister wandering the Jianghu and being tricked by a handsome and rich young hero? Shilingshan, wake up. Your senior sister is getting married. Shilingshan was fuming. He interrupted his cultivation and glared at Zheng Dafeng. Zheng Dafeng, stop fanning the flames here. Zheng Dafeng rolled his eyes. You don't even know how to scold people. What do you know? Shilingshan was about to speak. He did not expect senior sister to say, Senior brother, you said before that if I want to break through the bottleneck of the fourth realm or reach the fifth realm, I should choose an ancient battlefield. Do you know what to do? I want to go out for a while. Shilingshan was dumbfounded. Zheng Dafeng glanced at the youth. Senior brother didn't eat enough before leaving the mountain. If you don't go to the toilet, you won't be able to eat anything. Shilingshan was sad and indignant. The two of them almost couldn't resist the urge to spar with Zheng Dafeng. However, when he saw Zheng Dafeng's hunchback, Shilingshan felt a little sad and let it go. Zheng Dafeng smiled and turned to Su Jian. There is a limit. However, for such a big matter, Master has his own plans. It's not up to me to worry. Su Jian asked, Senior brother, do you also think that I can leave my hometown alone now? Zheng Dafeng shook his head. It's better to bring a burden along. At least you can look after each other. Your realms are still too low and your brains aren't too bright. The dangers of the outside world are not in your realms but in your hearts. Shilingshan is still okay. He's usually soft-hearted and can be ruthless at crucial moments. However, you're usually hard-hearted. That's troublesome. Su Jian, when you two go out, you can tell the outside world that Shilingshan is your son so that those shameless bachelors won't bother you. Senior brother is on the mountain. When I think about this, my heart aches so much that I can't sleep. Su Jian did not know what to say. The stone spirit mountain was struck by lightning. Zheng Dafeng looked at the bamboo curtain and turned to leave the Yang family's shop. Zheng Dafeng went to the memorial archway where the 4 plaques were no longer mysterious. He walked around. After all, the plaques were still there. The 4 sayings were all very interesting. Zheng Dafeng went to the Iron Lock Well. It was now a private area on a mountain. He spent a lot of money to buy it but did not get any benefits. There was a hole in his brain. That big blockhead Jiang Yun had a lot of opportunities. When he thought of the Jiang family of Yun Lin, Zheng Dafeng grimaced. Seeing that there was no one around, he touched his pants. I've let you down. I studied hard and learned all kinds of martial arts. I didn't expect that even though I had a body of martial arts, there was no thief to kill. Zheng Dafeng left the town and went to the immortal tomb. There was no such name now. Dali had intentionally or unintentionally diluted this old saying. Now, the dilapidated statues had been fixed up. They were repaired and remodeled. The Dali imperial court had put in a lot of effort. As for the brand new martial temple, he did not go there. There was nothing to talk about. He could not see anything from staring at each other. Then, He took a detour and went to the waterfall at the junction of the Tiefu River and the Dragon Whisker River. He squatted there and threw stones. What a good way to say it was like duckweed entering the water. Zheng Dafeng changed to a place where the water was deep and slow. He stared at the water and muttered to himself, "There is such a handsome man in the world. The more I look at him, the more I want to beat him up." Finally, Zheng Dafeng passed by Ruan Tong's earliest sword shop. He walked to the stone arch bridge. The covered bridge had long been removed and the old stone bridge was restored. Zheng Dafeng sat alone on the stone bridge. He turned his head and looked at the north of the town. There was the old porcelain mountain and the many dragon kilns nearby. Zheng Dafeng retracted his gaze. 3,000 years ago, the sword immortal who rose quickly and disappeared quickly. He did not know what went wrong. After he suddenly became famous, he specialized in killing dragons. He killed until the sky turned dark. It was said that he wanted to be the first sword immortal to break through the bottleneck of the Ascendant Realm. The most proud scholar in the Central Divine Continent was not a sword immortal. He was really just a scholar. Otherwise, the entire structure of the vast expanse world might change as well. But regarding this secret, the old man who definitely knew the answer did not give an explanation. In the early years, Zheng Dafeng went in a roundabout way to beg Li hoping that his senior brother would ask. Li agreed, but later there was no follow-up. It could not be helped. It was still okay now. In any case, he could endure a few words of scolding. In the past, the old man was willing to talk to him. As long as it was close to 10 words, it would make Zheng Dafeng feel like he was celebrating the new year. Therefore, Zheng Dafeng only knew that the last true dragon in the world did not try to go to the secret forbidden areas of the sea with a long history. Instead, it went ashore from the old dragon city and crashed out an underground dragon path. In the end, it died in Dali. Its purpose was to seek protection. It tried to let an ancient existence reopen the ascension platform and escape to an unknown place that the sages could not find. But that old man did not let it do as it wished. He chose to watch from the sidelines. In the end, it created one of the 36 small grotto heavens, Liju Grotto Heaven. The 4 sages of the 3 sects and 1 family set the rules and built the 4 hanging plaques. The local people of Liju Grotto Heaven jokingly called the Crab Square. The Song clan built another covered bridge on top of the original arch bridge. The purpose was to let Dali have a long and prosperous history and compete for the power of the world. Before Song Jianqiang left with Song Jisin and the maidservant Ji Qiu, he specifically asked Prince Song Jisin to go to the steps of the covered bridge to offer incense. The people who offered the incense were the descendants of the Song clan who had died tragically. The old supervisor, Song Yuzhang, was personally in charge of this matter. It was equivalent to knowing the bloody inside story of the Song clan. In the end, the empress, who was more powerful than anyone else in giving birth to sons, ordered Wang Yifu, the retainer of the fallen general of the Lu family, to chop off Song Yuzhang's head, put it in a box, and send it to the capital of Dali. After Song Yuzhang was killed, he became the mountain god of Luopa Mountain as a heroic spirit. It was hard to say whether it was Emperor Dali's compensation for this meritorious minister or another form of punishment. After all, Song Yuzhang had touched the old emperor's bottom line in one thing. That was, he dared to have feelings for Song Jisin. And Song Jisin did indeed have mixed feelings for Song Yuzhang. As the illegitimate son of the supervisor, Song Jisin, who had lived a carefree life in Mud Bottle Alley, did indeed regard Song Yuzhang as his biological father in those leisurely years. Deep in his heart, he was both resentful and admiring. For some reason, he thought of the dusty medicine shop in Old Dragon City. Actually, Zheng Dafeng missed it a little. Humans, when it came to serious good things, they often didn't think much about it. The past was the past. Instead, it was the sad things that weren't all bad things that they couldn't forget. Zheng Dafeng leaned back and used his hands as a pillow. He closed his eyes and muttered, "Is it so difficult to not think of yourself as a superior person and not treat others as fools? The world is strange." Ruan Xiu returned to the Dragon Spring Sword sect. She had an appointment with Pei Qian and Ju Mili to meet at the shop in Dragon Rider Alley. Today, The three of them sat at the entrance of the shop to bask in the sun. Ruan Xiao realized that Meili seemed to be avoiding her. She wasn't as fluent as before when she told the story of the North Continent. Ruan Xiao looked again and roughly understood the situation. Anyway, it was related to the Jade Liquid River God residence. Ruan Xiao wasn't curious about the specifics and couldn't be bothered to ask. Since Meili didn't want to say it herself, why would she make things difficult for a little girl? Ruan Xiao just ate the peach blossom cake. She didn't need to spend money. To be honest, she was the first acting shopkeeper of the two shops. Pei Qian said, "Sister Xiao, I went on a long trip this time. I traveled a long way." Ruan Xiao smiled and said, "That's amazing." Pei Qian nodded vigorously. "Amazing, amazing. Even I have to admire myself." Pei Qian hesitated for a moment and asked softly, "Sister Xiao, did you travel a long way too?" Ruan Xiao thought for a moment and said casually, "The sky and the earth, the lakes and the seas, the mountains and the ancient abyss. There's nowhere I can't go. Wherever the sun shines, there are footprints. Wherever the light of the fire shines, it's the territory." Zhu Meili hurriedly raised her two palms. They didn't fit, but they were very fast. "Wow, Sister Xiao, you're the best. Sister Xiao, you must have changed your shoes a lot." Ruan Xiao smiled. "It's all right." Zhu Meili racked her brains to finish the story and went to the straw shop next door to chat with Zhu. Pei Qian told her not to talk about what happened in Red Candle Town. Zhu Meili had actually forgotten about it, but after Pei Qian said that, she talked about it in her sleep. She was so worried that she couldn't eat well recently. Even eating melon seeds couldn't fill her stomach. So when she saw Sister Xiao today, she felt awkward. Ruan Xiao stood up and said, "Let's go." Pei Qian also stood up. "Sister Xiao, don't go to the Jade Liquid River." Ruan Xiao smiled and rubbed the little girl's head. "Liking you and liking little Meili's story is one thing. How to be a person is up to me." The next moment, Pei Qian stomped his feet anxiously and scratched his head. What should he do? Fortunately, Zhu Lian came and said to Pei Qian, "It's okay." Pei Qian smiled. "Old chef, why are you addicted to appearing and disappearing mysteriously?" Zhu Lian walked into the shop. Pei Qian followed behind and said with a smile, "We're family, 20% off." Zhu Lian said with a smile, "I actually know how to make some pastries. Among them, the golden ball of jujube paste cake is a little famous. I figured it out." Pei Qian said doubtfully, "Is it the jujube paste cake that was extremely expensive in the capital of Nanyuan Kingdom?" Zhu Lian put his hands behind his back and looked at the various pastries in the shop. He nodded. "You didn't expect it, right?" Pei Qian praised, "Old chef, you really have the life of a chef. It's a pity that you don't look good. Otherwise, even if you're old, you still can't be a bachelor." Zhu Lian nodded. Sharu had a strange expression. Ruan Xiao traveled to the Jade Liquid River with the wind. After hesitating for a while, she unwillingly used a camouflage. As soon as she entered the Jade Liquid River, the river water instantly boiled, as if the sun had fallen to the bottom of the river and was being cooked by fire. The heavenly might was vast and mighty. Ruan Xiao walked into the main hall of the water residence. The water goddess who had been repairing her golden body by relying on the water was already kneeling on the ground. She did not even know the reason why she could not control herself when she saw this woman and only wanted to die quickly. Ruan Xiao walked past the so-called water goddess who was kneeling on the ground and trembling all over. She stepped up the stairs and turned to sit on the main seat of the main hall. Her posture was slightly tilted as she supported her chin with one hand and stared into the distance. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.